Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto show off his awesomeness against Rias' Peerage and Sona's Peerage. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto turned his hard red silted eyes to the girl who had enough experiences with him to hold back a flinch simply by knowing he wasn't directing his anger at her. They knew she was here, they felt the energies and barriers you put up at this place. She wouldn't be worth fighting over if they just wanted her. They knew about her sacred gear and likely planned to take it from her. Are you sure? Take away the loss of life for a moment, you found a way that could give you more power and better support. However, the method is held by your enemy nearby. Now you have a single chance to claim it before it becomes out of reach, and by doing so, you can really piss off your enemy and you think they won't try to take the power back. What would you do? Naruto asked coldly. He was starting to call slight amounts of his flames to him, cooling his anger enough to think clearer. If it wasn't likely to start a war or get anyone hurt, then most likely, yes. Rias admitted, rubbing her sore eyes. Naruto, we need to plan this carefully. Kaneko said simply. She was pulling on a set of blue fingerless hardback gloves with pink paw prints on the back. Rias looked over the rest of her Peerage all ready to go, waiting only on her word, each looking like they would be clawing their way through the floor walls if she didn't give the order to follow Naruto. Let's get Hikari-chan off the floor, then go chase down our wayward dragon again. Yudo and Kaneko rushed in and picked the girl up off the floor to move to the couch, while Akeno prepared a teleportation circle to get them as close to the church as they could get. Naruto sailed through the air as he jumped from building to building with such speed nobody would see anything but a blur. He'd released his gravity seal before he'd left. Yudo's hadn't been activated yet today, so he'd be fine if they did get there before he was completely finished with this. Following the trails of light energy, one of which he remembered seeing a few nights back from the guy that had been attacking Azazel. Wisps of black flames formed around his feet as Naruto's speed doubled. His first priority was to get Asia out of wherever they'd taken her. Then he'd go back to bring about oblivion to them all. Ninja now, dragon later. The boy repeated to himself in his mind, controlling his desire to rage in and burn everything between him and the blonde nun. Naruto finally stopped as he landed in one of the trees that grew inside the crumbling stone wall around the church grounds. Taking in the massive amounts of energies mixed in the building, Naruto was forced to stop the chakra that was flowing into his eyes so he could look over the architecture. The building itself wasn't too large, just a little bigger than a two-story house with a bell tower off to one side, near the middle of the main building. Open-air covered walkways came out of the back of the church on either side, leading to three smaller barracks-like buildings in the back of the lot of land. The church building had many large stained glass windows on either side of the building and 8-foot-high solid-looking double doors for the main entrance. Looking the building over, he could already tell the main door was locked tight, so any attempts to get in that way would make them aware of his presence before he was ready. He needed to sneak in and get Asia out before any fighting took place. Turning on his energy side again, he looked the building over before he noticed something he hadn't seen when he arrived due to all the mixing energies blurring together. There was an underground cavern just below where the church stood, and it had a couple of entrances to the tunnels. One near the back of the church that had several people wandering back and forth through it. Two were connected to the barracks in the back, which had a dozen people moving through it, and the one he was focused on at the moment was directly below where the bell tower stood. The reason for him focusing on this entrance was because he could use the tower as his way into the church itself before he tried getting into the caverns. It also seemed to be the route of least priority, as there was only one person walking through it. Catching a flash of red in the corner of his sight made Naruto look towards the city, and he almost cursed. Rias had come sooner than he thought she would. While having backup would be great if he was going to storm the place, he couldn't count on keeping Asia out of the crossfire like she had almost been during the fight with Freed. Ninja now, dragon later. Naruto repeated one more time before he shot himself out of the tree he'd been in and onto the roof of the church. Landing silently from chakra in the soles of his feet, he rushed over to the wall of the tower and used his surface walking chakra training to run up it. Dropping in the hole cut into the floor where the rope that rings the bell should be, the ninja applied chakra to his hands and carried himself to a wall once more. Running down the wall, instead of the staircase that wound around the tower walls, Naruto touched ground again in seconds. Checking his surroundings, he could already see his clubmates' energies moving closer fast, and he could see the man in the underground was almost directly below him as well, and it was that annoying fallen he'd faced before. Spying the needed door to head into the underground, Naruto moved toward it before hopping above it to wait for it to open, pulling two kunai from his sleeve into reverse grips. The moment the fedora-wearing being stepped out the door, the ninja above him swung his arms down as quickly as he could, causing the ring ends of the knives to slam into the man's temples, knocking the fallen out before he even knew he was in danger. Realizing he'd forgot most of his gear in the hidden compartment of his desk at home, Naruto stripped the man of his long coat and cut it into strips. Within seconds of removing the coat from the man, Naruto had him bound and gagged and was running down the stairs, heading to where he could see Asia's pure energy emanating out. He just rounded one of the corners when he heard a loud crash from upstairs, causing more than a few of the priests and 6 of the fallen angels in the room to start running towards another one of the exits. Well, at least I'll know where they are most of the time. Naruto thought sarcastically while he started to draw his flames to cover his body. He only had enough over him that he was far harder to see in the dark, while at the same time the room was flooded with the emptiness he always invoked. What's going on? One of the fallen yelled out as he saw many of the priests start to mess up their chats, most were outright shivering from fear. Are the devils causing this? Another fallen asked as her long green hair swung back and forth behind her rapidly turning head. Soon the whole room was filled with mutters and fearful whispers. Naruto used this confusion and disorder to creep closer. Just as he was close enough to see Asia strapped to a large metal cross with wires running to it, he saw another fallen angel step up and start yelling. Enough. This is simply a trick to make us slow down, so they'll have time to come and stop the ritual. We need not stop, the devils won't make it in time to stop us. Continue the rite. The larger man yelled, as 6 large black feathered wings could be seen from his back. The man was releasing an extraordinary amount of killing intent. His jet black hair was long enough to reach his mid-chest and looked mildly unkempt, while his red eyes had an insane gleam that made you feel like he would try to kill you simply for looking at him. Everyone in the room fell silent as the man yelled and started getting back to what they were doing before. Naruto wanted to curse at the man ruining the confusion, but pushed the impulse down while he pulled as many smoke bombs as he had on him. Feeling slightly vindictive for ruining a good chance, the blonde shot the first of the bombs straight into the red-eyed man's face. The rest hit the ground, filling the underground room with a thick plume of smoke. Visibility was reduced to 0, causing even more panic and confusion than the aura the black flames caused. The next words heard over the large amount of coughing soon caused even more confusion and disorder. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With the release of his clones into the cloud, the original Naruto rushed to Asia's side to free the nun. Due to his advanced energy sight, he could make out where he was heading easily and soon was cutting the wires from the back of the cross to free the girl. As the last wire was cut, the girl fell away from where she hung, right into the waiting arms of a clone, which quickly covered her mouth. SHH. Goldie, it's me, Naruto. Stay quiet, we're getting out of here. He whispered into her ear. The girl nodded happily into the clone's hand while he felt tears roll against his fingers. The clone holding her made his way back to the bell tower exit while the original made towards the exit that lead into the main part of the church, his kunai back in hand and lashing out at anything that came too close to him. He may not be able to attack flat out because Asia was still in the building, but he no longer had to worry if they knew he was there because she was being evacuated. He just hoped Rainer had enough common sense to avoid fighting. Azazel would be pissed if she died, and she was too prideful to simply run away, and he couldn't bring himself to care if he was killing those around him or not. None of them were devils, and Asia was still moving away from him. Reaching a doorway that he assumed led to a staircase up, Naruto kicked the passageway open, allowing a billow of smoke to escape with his body. Flames danced up and down his body as he turned his head back into the room. Come. Naruto declared before walking forwards up the stairs, fighting back an urge to make a longer statement. I think Red's and Uncle's flair for the dramatic is starting to wear off on me. Naruto walked calmly up the stairs as he could see the energies through the walls to know that Yudo and Kaneko were still going strong in their fight. However, he could feel that although the strongest of them was still in the smoke-filled chamber behind him, Rias and Akeno had their hands full in the back lot of the church. As he ascended the stairs, he couldn't help but notice 2 amusing things happen in the fight above him. The aura he'd been flooding the building with was finally reaching the surface as he could see the 3 fallen that Yudo and Kaneko fighting start to slow down. His friends, who were now getting used to the feelings that came with his aura however, start to speed up. Reaching the entrance that hid the stairwell, Naruto dug one of his hands into the wood and pushed it aside, not bothering to destroy it or look for the handle. All fighting stopped as the podium was thrown sideways away from the stairs it hid, while swirls of black fire could be made out through the wave of thick smoke rushing out from the underground. Even Yudo and Kaneko, knowing who it was, had to take a second to push away the thought of how evil his entrance made the dragon boy look. His glowing red eyes could be seen through the black flames and grey smoke, while his footfalls made a slight crunching noise from the broken glass and wood from their fight. Naruto silently looked over the 5 as smoke thickened the air in the room before it escaped through the smashed windows. Through slow, measured steps the flame-covered blonde made his way to the 2 other devil, taking in every detail around him until he saw a flash of gold disappearing into the forest. Prep, kitten, we need to make this quick, my fight's coming and you're needed by Red and Sparky. Naruto said in a quiet monotone voice, sending chills down the black-winged angel spines as they floated above the devils. The knight and catgirl nodded their consent before falling into their respective battle stances, the blonde swordsman summoning a second sword as he did so. "Don't take us lightly," one of the angels yelled at the group. The group started summoning a large amount of light spears to rain down on the devils and dragon, angered that this new flame-coated boy would brush them off so easily. "I am Morax of the fallen angels. Remember that as UTHHHHH. His introduction was stopped as he fell to the floor below, one of his wings completely missing from his back. "No one asked your name." Everyone turned to look where the voice had spoken from the other side of the angel group. Standing and looking at them was Naruto, the flames had receded away from his head and torso to cover only his hands, forearms and feet. His blonde hair waved lazily in an unnatural wind while he held the missing angel wing out to the side in his left hand. But the flames gone, his glare at the fallen had become even more intimidating as the other two female fallen angels looked visibly shaken by his speed and ferocity. "Leave now or die here. Choose." The black-haired angel looked at her blue-haired companion, the look clearly saying she had no intention of sticking around. "Carwarner, I don't know about you, but I'm out of here." "Rainer, you can't be serious, they just a couple of low-class devils," the blue-haired women tried to say. "Those two, maybe," the black-haired angel said while waving at the blonde knight and white-haired rook. "But that thing is no devil," Rainer said while pointing clearly at Naruto as he tossed the wing away, his glare never wavering from the two. "I didn't see or feel him when he took Morax's wing. Did you? If we stay, we are dead and I didn't sign up to die here." With her piece said, Rainer turned and flew out an open window opposite where the clone had taken Asia to hide. Carwarner looked back and forth between the devils and the window that Rainer had disappeared from before making her decision. With a sneer on her face, she dispelled all but one of her spears. "I guess fighting isn't really a choice, but at least I can get payback," the blue-haired woman said with a bite in her tone. She then threw the spear with all her might, stabbing it right through the heart of the fallen Morax. "I warned you to keep your hands off me, bastard." With her revenge complete, she bowed lightly to the three remained beings in the room before taking off to follow Rainer, leaving a confused trio blinking in her wake. "Well, that was unexpected," Yuto said, confused by both the retreat and the blue-haired woman's exiting bow. Kaneko nodded in agreement as she couldn't even think of anything to say. "Odd as it was, and coming from me that means it was really odd, you two need to help Red while I hold the others back," Naruto said, shaking the two out of their daze. "Right. We'll be back as soon as we can," Yuto said as he and Kaneko ran out the door to reinforce their king. The two had just made it outside when Naruto dodged left while slashing backwards with a kunai in his right hand. "Thanks for letting them leave. You were the one that interrupted the ritual. Low-class filth can easily be dealt with later." The seething six-winged man growled out, a few of his feathers falling to the floor from Naruto's kunai. "You say that like you can escape oblivion to have a later," Naruto stated in a cold tone. "Oh, the little devil thinks he can beat me," the man said mockingly. "I am Mistima, what is your name, little devil?" The flames around his arms and feet started growing in intensity as Naruto slipped into a fighting stance. "Maelstrom, and I am no devil," the whiskered blonde declared as he released his draconic wings and shot towards Mistima, black flames trailing in his wake. Rias panted as she glared at the three fallen angels that she and Akeno were fighting, two of which had 4 wings each, shooting from their backs. While the fight had started off pretty evenly, Akeno and her having worked on covering each other's weaknesses a great deal since the death worm, the 3-on-2 fight soon started to show who had the better chances. In a war of attrition, which this fight had become, those with the greater reserves and stamina will always win. With their enemy outnumbering them, plus an average 4-winged angel is equal to high mid-class low high-class devils in terms of magical power, and the situation was not looking good for the priestess or Thunder and the red-haired ruined princess. She had felt the aura of emptiness from Naruto start to seep into the air moments ago, as both Akeno and she were on high alert in case more backup showed up for their opponents or if any of their allies needed help. "But you, what are we going to do? He is coming, but these two are not the strongest ones here," Akeno whispered as she stood near her king, just as tired as the redeed, but not at all ready to give up. Rias quickly formed a well out of her power of destruction, stopping a hail of spears from the trio of angels. "We need to hold out, Naruto's on the surface now, he'll deal with his end, then we escape," Rias said, not wanting to have to keep fighting, as she knew she'd lose. While she knew Naruto was stronger than them in pure power, she didn't know how strong he was going all out, and as she'd grown up with her abilities, she believed she had more experience in fighting than the boy. Akeno nodded and formed an array of casting circles in front of her, just inside the wall her friend had made, preparing to release a wide area blast of thunder magic the second the wall fell. Once Rias felt her wall was no longer being pelted with spears of light, she let it fall and gave her black-haired friend a nod. No sooner were the circles visible to the fallen did they start releasing blasts of thunder at the trio. Rias chanced to glance at the church while the blasts were happening, just in time to see a fallen flying out of it through one of the upper windows. The being didn't even glance their way before it started to run from the churchyard as quickly as possible. Rias blinked in surprise, as she was sure they would have tried to help take them out. She couldn't even finish that thought before a second fallen, one with blue hair this time, followed the first, disappearing into the sky of the setting sun. Akeno, two of the fallen just retreated. Hold on a little longer, I'm betting help will be here for us soon. Rias said as she started sending balls of her family magic to join her queen's thunder. Sucker bet but you. Akeno said, sweat dripping down her face as she continued her onslaught. She had managed to just catch the two-winged angel and was now splitting her attention between keeping the other two away while taking the third out of this fight for good. I know better than play poker with Ghosty and expect to win. Yet you keep trying to get him to play. Rias asked, feeling a bit more lighthearted now that she was sure she could feel Yudo and Kaneko coming their way. She built up as strong of an attack as she could and aimed the blast towards the weakened fallen angel. If you strip poker but you know how Ghosty likes Western games. The black-haired girl said mischievously. What? The Redeed yelled, surprise, causing her to release both a larger blast than she had intended, as well as releasing it sooner than she expected, still killing her target though. She completely ignored this as she stared at her queen in shock. If Yufu, I'll teach you to play after we win this, if you like. Akeno said with a chuckle, while reminding the Redeed now wasn't the time to be getting distracted. They all remembered last time. Shaking herself from her thoughts, Rias quickly refocused on the two remaining fallen angels while watching her knight and rook charge into the battlefield to help even the odds of the fight. The added support allowed the tired girls a chance to regain some of their breath. They now could use single-point attacks, as wide-area ones could also hit their comrades. As the battle was rejoined, a new attack pattern formed with them, each close-range fighter focused on one target while the ranged fighters supported them and looked for an opportunity to go for the kill. While it was more pressure on the close combat fighters as they were more susceptible to be hurt, it allowed the tired wizard types to regain their energy. The four were starting to regain ground on the fallen angels as they now not only had better team tactics but more fighters as well. There was a pause however when everyone felt as if their stomach dropped out of them. Waves of hopelessness and despair flooded their battlefield, followed by an enormous wave of light energy, one that was laced with a feeling of wrath. The fallen angels could only shiver in slight fright while the devils stared at the church in awe. This amount of power coming from Naruto had only been felt by Kaneko on the night where he argued with Sona, but the light energy was much bigger than the Dragon Boys. Kaneko, however much she wanted, didn't look away from the angel she'd been fighting when the wave hit. As such, she noticed his distracted state and used it to her advantage. Charging in, the white-haired girl jumped up to the right side of him and delivered a spinning kick to his face as hard as she could. Distracted and tired from the long fight, the four-winged man wasn't able to defend himself and was sent directly into his companion, causing both to fall to the ground below. Yudo spun back to attention just as the two crashed into each other. Using their disorientation from both impacts to his advantage, the blonde knight called upon the power of his sacred gear. Sword birth to create a long two-handed blade with lightning power. The moment the two hit the ground, he rushed forward and stabbed them both through the stomach, effectively, if temporarily, pinning the pair to the ground. But you. Akeno-senpai. Now. The boy yelled before he jumped as far away as he could. The two girls wasted no time in moving on the call, locking on and releasing the largest attacks they could on the two pinned fallen angels. When the blast cleared, nothing of the two remained. However, the group was given no time to relax as, at that moment, the wall of the church was blown apart and a rocket of black flames flew from the side. Minutes ago with Naruto. Red glowing chakra-covered kunai clashed against a purple broadsword of light inside the church as Naruto and Mistima fought with skill and power. Naruto's void flames completely covered his wings as he clashed against the strong fallen angel. He had to use them repeatedly to fend off spears of light that Mistima would summon and sling at him, even while engaging in close combat. Naruto was pulling tricks of his own. He would often replace himself with hunks of wood that were scattered around the battlefield and stab at the man's unguarded back. He'd even used his teleportation spell a few times, as the momentary flash of blackness could be used to disorient the fallen angel for a moment so Naruto could score a hit or two. However, so far nothing was giving either being their desired win. Mistima would use his wings to shield against most attack, a shield that Naruto could not cut through, while Naruto's flames would consume anything that came in contact with them unless the boy directed them not to. While Naruto was sure he could eat through the wings with the acidic nature his chakra could take or with his void flame, both options would take more time than his opponent would give him. Healing the stabs he'd already received was painful enough, but he was sure not even his regeneration could heal a removed head. Ah, you are not without the ability to back your words, young Dev No Maelstrom. Mistima said while he breathed deeply, exacerbated from the fight. Naruto noticed his hits on the man had done some damage. Not much, but the man was not unscathed. The dragon cannot be called such without the power to back up their title. While I am a young dragon kin, I'm a still of the blood. Naruto said slowly, well he wasn't normally one to talk with such arrogance, he had learned why Rias normally did her speeches. Using facts in such a way that it could plant seeds of doubt in an enemy's mind, making them misjudge something and make a mistake. He then started releasing a great deal more of his flames, covering both his arms and legs in them once more, as well as increasing the aura's effect as high as he consciously could. Mistima grinned insanely and released his powers fully, making the ground tremble as the opposing forces clashed. Good great show it to me. Show me the power of a dragon. The insane man screamed before he suddenly appeared before Naruto and threw as hard a punch as he could at the boy's face. Naruto had just managed to get his arms up to block the punch, but the force behind it had caught him off guard and launched him through the wall behind him into the side yard of the church grounds. His flight ended in a flame-lined trench in the ground that made Naruto release a quiet groan. While the broken bones from the punch had already mended themselves, that had still hurt far more than he liked. He wasn't given any more time as he kicked the dirt below him in order to give himself a jump and avoid being skewered as Mistima appeared, his sword piercing the ground just as Naruto vacated the spot. Already above the man, Naruto threw out a set of flame-coated kunai at the angel while he used his wings to control his landing. Mistima swatted the blades away with his wings as he turned to where his opponent landed and rushed him, swinging his blade to remove the boy's head. Ducking under the sword, Naruto shot a fist for the man's stomach, only to have it blocked by a knee. Pushing off the knee with his fist, Naruto spun himself out of the way of Mistima's descending blade. Rising while continuing his spin, the blonde lashed out with a high kick that was blocked by two of the man's wings. This back and forth continued at speeds the normal human eye couldn't follow, meaning the devil group watched blurs of movement and sparks of flame and purple light flashing across the field. To most, the fight looked almost even, however both Naruto and Mistima knew the boy was losing. He was always moving back, countering when he could and trying to misdirect the fallen to try and land a hit. The fight, which started almost at the front of the churchyard, had finally started to reach the back area when the two jumped apart. What happened, boy? Where is your great power of the dragon? Mistima yelled, the insanity on his face having grown while the two fought. Where is this oblivion you promised me? Was it all talk? Or maybe I need to motivate you to show it. You will meet your oblivion by my hand, Mistima. Naruto called, his panting breath returning to normal quickly. I don't think so, not as you are now. Mistima shot back with a laugh before he held an open hand towards the shocked devils. A massive casting circle appeared before his outstretched hand while he still looked at Naruto. Maybe if I kill some of these devils you're so fond of, you'll show me this supposed power. The man said with a loud laugh. Naruto wasn't even given time to speak before the fallen angel released a beam of power towards the shocked group that were just in hearing range of the two. Naruto forced everything he could into getting between the beam and Kaneko, who stood at the front of the devils. Chakra burnt in his veins as it forced his muscles to obey. His magic surrounded his body, removing resistance from his path, allowing him to go beyond his limits. His void flames consumed the extra energies and heeded their master's desire, seeming to pull him even faster into the way of the energy blast. The beam was little more than 2 feet from the white-haired catgirl, already starting to cause burns to her skin slightly when Naruto appeared between them. Roaring flames of the blackest night raged around him as he held back the light energy, however it was clear that he wouldn't be able to for long, as his feet were sliding backwards from the force. No. I will not lose. The boy yelled within his mind as he dug his feet into the ground. He called every bit of energy he could to try and beat the beam, which had almost tripled in size, as Mistima had realized it was Naruto holding it back. Just die, you worthless dragon. The mad fallen angel screamed over his beam while he poured his power into the attack. Rage filled Naruto's mind as his chakra split itself between reinforcing the ground he was holding himself on and strengthening his body to hold back the beam. His magic and flames both went into trying to overpower the light attack, but he could see it was starting to lose. He needed more. Desperately, he dug into himself to force more energy out. Everyone heard it as a loud crack resounded throughout the courtyard, and with it came waves of flames that darkened everything around them, and a deep reverberating roar ripped its way from the boy's throat. Pain coursed through the whiskered blonde's body, the likes of which he could never remember feeling before. He felt his body changing, his incisor teeth lengthened and became sharper, the skin around his eyes tightened and hardened as it did on his feet and hands. The nails on his fingers and toes grew into the tips of his digits, making them hard and removing all feeling from them before growing out into claws or talon. As quickly as the pain and changes had started they stopped and the flames started feeding on the beam even faster. Naruto didn't care though. He didn't care how much he hurt or that he was losing bits of his humanity with these powers. All he cared about was the man at the other end of this light tried to hurt his family and that he had to die. The orc could only watch in shocked horror as Naruto started moving through the beam of light with his right hand extended, his black flames consuming the energy before it could reach them. His shirt was completely disintegrated by the power from the beam, spots of skin starting to do the same across the boy's chest and arms, but the spots healed just as fast as they appeared. Suddenly, Naruto stopped walking and shot forward at such a speed that the beam of light exploded, blinding everyone for just a moment. When their vision returned to them, they saw Naruto standing before Fallen Angel, his black flame-covered hand stabbed clear through the left side of the other man's chest, destroying his opponent's heart. "Go now, Oblivion calls for you," Naruto whispered into the dying man's ear. "I hear it, Maelstrom, Dragon of Oblivion." Mestima whispered back before his eyes lost all light and the flames consumed his body. This was the last sight Naruto saw that day as his eyes rolled up in his head, the pain he had felt overpowered his mind and caused him to pass out. Familiar trials. One crystalline blue eye twitched open, only to blink closed again with a groan. Everything hurt right now for the young dragonkin. His skin felt like it had been peeled off then glued back on, his fingers felt like they'd been broken repeatedly, all his joints hurt, his throat was raw, even his hair hurt right now. Knowing he was going to need at least a few minutes to recover enough to move again, Naruto tried to get his mind to work out what had happened. His memory came back to him in short bursts, memories of his clones hunting and attack priests, the memories of his clone with Asia getting to a barrier that had been set up. Likely Red's work he added mentally while he started getting feeling back in his body. The clone with the girl had waited behind some trees near the edge of the grounds until a bright purple light filled the area. It lasted only a moment before pitch black flames covered the grounds and the clone popped. Finally his own memories of the fight he'd been in came back. The feeling of how close he was to dying again, the need to protect his friends, a secondary image came to his mind of a feminine black-haired youth in a short-sleeved pink kimono decorated with blue swirl marks. When a person has something important they want to protect, that's when they become truly strong. Aku, Naruto thought as he remembered the life-changing friend turned enemy. Slowly letting all the memories filter through his mind and organize themselves, the boy started to feel around his body. He could tell he was in a bed, likely Rias or his own after Rias had laid claim to it because of the silk sheets. He also felt weights holding him down, one on each side of his chest and one on his stomach. He opened his eyes to take in the room, his memory finally showing the end of his fight with Mestima, and he needed to see everyone to be sure they were alright. His first view was not what he expected it to be. He was used to Rias and Akeno sleeping next to him and was half expecting to have a blob of red or black from their hair covering his sight, so having a curtain of white was a new view. Taking a second to use some of the minimal chakra he had regained, he switched places with the pillow that was in the corner of the room and looked back at the bed. As almost expected, Rias and Akeno had been at his sides, now cuddling into the body pillow. However, he hadn't expected that Asia was passed out where his stomach was or that Kaneko was above his pillows. The two new girls had been fully dressed, letting him know that they hadn't planned on sleeping where they had, but rather they appeared to have fallen asleep while doing something else. Mind too fogged from sleep to wake them and ask, the blonde boy staggered out into the hall in hopes of finding a shower or coffee, whichever appeared before him first would be fine. Yuto yawned loudly while he returned to Naruto's house from picking up breakfast for them all, which was quickly becoming the group's new base of operations. He would have liked to keep it separate himself, but Rias was finding it much simpler to come here to do their work because they always ended up here in the end anyway. She didn't see a point in keeping their devil work separate from the rest of their lives because to her, it had always been part of her life. He had to give it to Naruto for his tolerance in dealing with these things. The dragon boy was easy to anger over some seemingly trivial things, and yet that would have made Yuto lose even his cool Naruto dealt with easily. Opening the door to the kitchen he almost started to laugh. Hikari was blushing and covering her eyes, while Naruto was glaring at the kettle, seeming to be waiting for it to boil. The reason for Hikari's blush is Naruto seemed to have come right here from his bed. This normally wouldn't have mattered as he always wore sleeping pants due to knowing what he was like in the morning. However, after the fight the day before yesterday, Rias and Asia had tried healing him and ended up spending a great deal of their energy to try and refill his reserves, which had been the only problem he had. As such he'd been stripped naked, as such he was now completely naked, half asleep in the middle of the kitchen while his sister was in the room. At least he's up. Yuto said while he carried the drinks and food over to the counter. Tiba-kun. Please make him put on pants. Hikari begged, her eyes still covered as to not look at her brother figure. Yuto chuckled as he walked forward and put a coffee cup in the other boy's hand. Drink. He said simply before taking the rest to the dining room. He popped back into the kitchen long enough to lead Hikari out and give her something to eat. They only had to wait a couple of minutes before they heard Naruto complaining about being naked somehow before he set off back upstairs. That was a sight of nice and I really didn't need to see. Hikari muttered after he had disappeared upstairs. She was slowly picking at her breakfast while waiting for her blush to die down. Yudo continued to chuckle. To him, it was relieving to have the other blonde doing something stupid after he had witnessed his fight. It's not funny, I've been traumatized. Come on now Hikari-chan, you can't say you didn't expect something like this to happen at some point. We all know how dead to the world he is in the morning. Yudo said with an amused grin plastered on his lips. I could hope can't I? The snake girl asked before sticking her tongue out at the boy. Yudo continued to chuckle while shaking his head. I'm just glad he's back on his feet even if there was nothing wrong with him. The amount of energy he let off Hikari lost her happy look. She was happy he was okay too, but felt horrible that she was so useless. She'd been knocked out cold when the group that took Asia blew the door in. All she was told she received was a burst on her head, which Rias healed in moments. Everyone else had ended up fighting for their lives to save the blonde nun, Naruto coming home being carried by Yudo and Akeno. It's not your fault Hikari-chan. Hikari looked back at the blonde knight, having been startled from her thoughts. She closed her eyes and sighed, I know Kiba-kun, but I just feel so useless. Asia-chan is my friend too, everyone was working so hard. Nai-sen was out cold for over a day, and what did I do? Slept. Her frustration could be felt in her voice and clearly seen on the purple-haired girl's face. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her knuckles white, while she clenched a fist around her chopsticks. Sighing tiredly, as he hadn't gotten much sleep, even if he did sleep this time, Yudo could understand what the young Lamia was dealing with. Hikari, I'm training with Naruto and Kaneko in the afternoons. Maybe if you ask Naruto he will start helping you as well. The girl bit her lip and thought. Maybe, but I kinda wanted to do this for him, not have him help me with this. Then maybe after you learn the transformation spell you can continue to study magic. Akeno offered, as she just heard Yudo's offer and decided to add her own. I'll even help you learn if you'd like. Really me-chan? Akeno smiled and nodded before she was once again subject to a flying Lamia glomp. Oh thank you. She sank smiling. Hikari quickly let go of the black-haired girl and rushed around the table to hug Yudo as well. And thank you too Kiba-kun. I didn't do anything. The boy said with a chuckle. You listened and made me feel better. That's more than thankworthy, Hikari said while pulling again from him. Ni-chan are all boys as thick as Nai-san and Kiba-kun here. Oh I'm not thick. If you fu, most are worse Hikari-chan. Akeno replied with a hand hiding her giggles, which made Hikari laugh even more, while Yudo just grumbled. So anyone else awake or just you Akeno-senpai? Yudo asked while he moved around setting out food and drinks for them. I think Kaneko-chan was waking up while I was leaving the room. Akeno said. But you and Asia-chan were still asleep from giving Ghosty-kun so much energy. Once she had finished saying this Naruto was dragged into the room by Kaneko, the petite girl forced him into a seat before dropping into his lap without a word. The boy was mostly dressed having a pair of workout pants on and an open button-up shirt exposing his chest. Water was still dripping from his hair as he appeared to have just gotten out of the shower when the cat girl found him. Welcome back to the world of the living tortoise. Did you enjoy your nap? Yudo asked, a small smirk on his face, clearly calmed now that his friend was up and about and dressed. The early bunny boy, ask again when I'm awake. Naruto grumbled back while he reached for another coffee that had been left out for him. Missing the fact that Yudo had shown that he figured out where the bunny boy reference came from. At least you're dressed this time. Hikari grumbled at the boy while he drank his coffee. Not my fault someone else stripped me in my sleep. Naruto shot back. Kaneko, who just started munching on some pastries that Yudo had gotten for her breakfast, shot the boy a blank look. Aka. Come on kitten, everyone knows what I'm like in the morning. Naruto tried to defend himself from the shots, only to have everyone give him a look, mostly deadpan though Akeno was clearing amused. Oh I don't mind you walking around like that Ghosty-kun. Akeno said happily, everyone including Naruto turned their deadpan stares to her making her giggle more. Blah, I give up, it's too early for this sort of thing. Naruto declared as he slumped down a little. Just as he was lifting a bite of eggs into his mouth the last two girls quickly came into the room. As soon as Asia saw him she started to rush towards him. Oh thank the Lord you she didn't get to finish as she was suddenly slammed into the floor holding her head. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that reaction. You're a devil and now Asia you can't praise the biblical god anymore. Rias scolded lightly. I forgot. Asia said giggling nervously. Naruto sent a sharp look towards Rias before looking at Asia. And why exactly are you a devil now Goldie? Asia sat up without raising her head, her fingers nervously fiddling with one of the ties on her nightshirt. Well, when Naruto-san was hurt I kept running out of magic to try and heal you. Rias-san her mentioned that she wished she had a bishop so she had more magic to help you. So I asked her to make me one. She told me that I'd be basically turning against everything I was as a nun, but this way I can help Naruto-san and Hikari-chan and I won't have to leave. Naruto only groaned into his hands while he shook his head at the girl. You wouldn't have left anyways Goldie. This is your home now. If you tried to leave I'm pretty sure Hebe-chan would have tied you to a chair." Hikari nodded sagely, while Asia smiled and blushed. "Besides, you start school Monday. Speaking of, so do you, Amato, so you better start working on the spell after breakfast." "Hi Nai-san," Hikari said excitedly. The young girl was almost bouncing in her seat. After breakfast and more than a few cups of coffee, Naruto had returned to his now furnished study, in which he was followed by Kaneko and Yuto. Sitting behind his desk and booting up his computer, Naruto watched the two sit down in a couple of the 3 high back chairs on the other side of his large old oak desk. He'd had his study done in warm blues and cool black coloring to give it the feeling of peaceful waters so as to calm him while he worked. The walls were lined with bookshelves, even if most were still empty, so that he had room for his collection. "What can I do for you two?" "Well, I'm here to see if I got my answer right to your bunny boy comments." "Tortoise and the hare, right?" Yuto asked, feeling much more at ease in this room than the orc room. Naruto nodded with a slight grin. "So I guess you're telling me that I'm rushing into things." "That's right, rushing forward is making you miss details that are right in front of you, details that would give away the answer to your question." Naruto explained. His small grin showed that he knew exactly which questions the other blonde boy wanted to ask. "You really are a pain in the ass, you know that. Only when it's amusing." Naruto countered in a heartbeat. Turning away from the other blonde, Naruto focused on his white-haired catgirl friend. "So what can I do for you, kitten?" Kaneko took a deep breath while closing her eyes for a moment. When she finally opened her eyes again, she stared straight into Naruto's eyes. "Train me with you." Naruto raised an eyebrow. He was starting to think she had forgotten about his request for her to learn something to balance his growing aggressive style and outlook. "Okay. I'll train you with Yuto." "No. With you," the white-haired girl said. Naruto kept his eyebrow raised while he looked at her, waiting for her to explain. "I saw you. When we were about to be attacked, I was too weak, everyone almost died because I was weak. Don't want to lose anyone else. Will be painful to catch up. Don't care. You'll have to do everything I say. Don't care, trust you." Naruto closed his eyes with a sigh, something he'd been doing way too often since he started hanging out with this group. "Fine, just be sure you realize just where I need to put the seal." When he looked at her, he could see her blush lightly, but her eyes were still firm, no hesitation whatsoever. Rias stared blankly at the letter in front of her. Akeno sat by her side, a worried frown on her normally smiling face. "What are we going to do?" The two were currently at the redhead's desk in the occult research club room. "For now there's nothing we can do, Akeno. I knew he'd be trying this soon. I'm just glad Oni-sama managed to send me some warning this time." Rias said tiredly. "I can only hope that I can challenge the marriage somehow. I'm running out of options." The two sat in silence for a few minutes thinking over what they had read. "The raiding game route is still an option, but we know Naruto is strong. With everyone together there's still a chance for us to win it," Akeno said, breaking the silence that had descended between them. "I know he's strong, Akeno. I just wish I knew how strong he was so I could plan for him more accordingly," Rias said as she turned to look out the window of the room. "But he doesn't show us anything, even when he's training with Yuto or you he does just enough to keep ahead of you." Akeno seemed to think deeply about this. "Perhaps you're going about this the wrong way, but What do you mean?" "Instead of trying to see what he can do, why don't we ask him? We've tried that, he just gives us somewhat vague answers unless it involves the magic we are helping him with," Rias reminded her queen. "That was when we were giving up nothing in return, Rias. I'm talking about putting everything on the table and then asking for help. We've all seen his protective streak. If you are level with him he'll help you. He might even let you know what he can do so you can plan," the black-haired queen offered. Rias narrowed her eyes as she thought about it. Even if things had smoothed out between them to a degree, Rias knew she never really had control of any situation he was involved in. He always did things his own way, only stepping back if he believed they didn't need him or he wanted to see something. At first this had annoyed her greatly, as she had always been in charge and in full control of her peerage. Having someone take that away from her made her feel undermined. Only his threat to just disappear had made her hold her tongue. She had thought that if it got too bad she would have to declare him stray, even if it horrified her to even think about. They argued about things, but it was never very bad, mostly it was more a viewpoint problem for them, and often as long as one could prove their point the other backed off. She'd even won a couple of arguments, and he relented. That had been the main reason she had been able to relax around him. He wasn't truly trying to undermine her, simply he didn't see any of them as anything but equals, something she didn't get except from Sona, and even that was a formal equal and rival. With Naruto he simply saw her as his equal and friend now, nothing more nothing less. As time wore on she was finding herself less annoyed that he'd do things his own way, with or without her knowledge and consent. She would still worry about him, much like during their fight with the fallen angels, but there was little she could do about it. Plus, this was the second time she owed her life to him. "We'll talk about it after we get them their familiars, it's only a week away, so I'll have time to try and think how to talk to them." Rias said, both relenting to her queen and putting off the problem for a while. Akeno frowned slightly, knowing that Rias was putting off telling them simply because she was worried about how to talk about her issues. "I'll hold you to that, but you." Before any more could be said, they heard a knocking at the door. "Come in." Rias called out, effectively ending the conversation for now. The door opened to reveal the black-haired, pink-eyed student council president. "Sona. What can I do for you?" "Sorry to bother you, Rias-sama." Both high-class devils winced slightly at the title before Sona pressed on. "But I would like to speak to you on the subject we did not get to cover during our last meeting." "Oh yes, I'm sorry I didn't get to see you earlier, however things have been surprisingly busy," Rias said with a small smile. "Please have a seat so we can talk." The girl offered while waving to one of the many seats while she left the desk to sit on one of the couches. "I'll get you both some tea," Akeno said with a pristine smile. "Thank you, Akeno." "Thank you, Himejima-sama." With that, Akeno disappeared out the door before Sona took up the couch across from Rias. "How goes your planning for Riser?" Ria's face dropped at the question as a small groan escaped her lips. "I was just talking about this with Akeno, I'm putting a hold on any more plans till after the next full moon." "Oh, why's that?" Sona asked as she tilted her head slightly. "I have 2 new members of my peerage, so I think they should both go to get their familiars." "Ah." Sona said before a small smirk appeared on her lips. "That could be troubling as I was planning on taking my 2 new members to get their familiars as well." Rias got a smirk as well. "Oh really? I guess you're not going to give this up easily, are you?" Sona didn't even have to say anything as her smirk said everything for her. "So I guess I'll have to challenge you for the right to go first." "Oh, a challenge is it? We can't have a rating game as neither of us are mature devils yet?" Sona asked intrigued. "Oh no, of course not, you have many more pieces than me and I doubt Hyoto and Naruto-kun meeting in that setting would end pleasantly." Rias agreed, getting another nod from Sona. "Besides, I do believe this is a bet between the 2 of us, not them." "How about a tennis match?" Sona seemed to think about it for a moment before nodding. "That could work, as this week is the club ball tournament." "Then it's agreed, we hold a tennis match, winner get to go to the familiar forest first," Rias said as she shook hands with Sona. "So what did you want to talk about?" Just as Rias said this, Akeno returned with the tea and set it out in front of the 2 devils. "It appears my parents thought farther ahead than I had assumed. Not only was there a marriage contract for me, there was one for my children as well," Sona said, a frown marring her face. Rias and Akeno's eyes both widened when they heard this, as this explained Sona's edginess for the last while. "My parents were also less than happy that I managed to break the first one and warned this family of how I managed to break the contract. He will not play me in a game of chess, nor is he letting my insults to his pride get the better of him, even as he shows his anger. I was hoping you might have some idea how to help me, as you have the same issue with Riser." Rias narrowed her eyes and bit the tip of her thumb as she tried to think about how to help her friend. After several minutes of silence, Rias sighed aloud before telling the other girl the truth. "Right now the only real plan I have is to challenge Riser to a rating game and hope I win." Sona sighed herself as she realized while that was easier for Rias, as the red-haired girl did have a trump card, her own peerage wasn't quite set up for a quick overpowering rush like the redhead could pull. As she had escaped the first engagement, she had focused on getting long-term potential rather than the fast power members that Rias had. She also was focused on members that would be loyal without question, not taking the chance with wild cards like Naruto. Sona closed her eyes while rubbing her temples under her glasses. "That would not be possible in my case. Unlike you, my peerage is nowhere near ready for battle, nor do I have the pure firepower to have a chance with such a plan." "Even with your other rook?" Rias asked. "Yes, Garu-san is strong, but does not have enough battle experience yet," Sona said while she thought about her chances. "Even if I was to take into account Hyoto-san and Saji-san gears, without enough training to use them it would do little good." "What are their gears anyways?" Rias asked, wanting to know exactly what she'd given to her rival and friend. "Saji-san has a fragment of Ritra, the absorption line, and Hyoto-san has a unique twice critical called Tiger's Pride. Both can be of great help with the proper training," Sona explained, lightly sliding her glasses back up her nose as she spoke. "However, you don't have the time to do that training. Do you have any idea when he's supposed to be coming?" Rias asked while trying to come up with some idea of how she could help. "I was told I'd be starting courtship next year, but considering how impatient he seemed I can see him trying to push up the timetable," Sona explained. "So much like what Riser is trying to do," Rias said tiredly. Sona could only nod mutely at her statement. Both girls were lost in thought before a loud crash sounded from outside Oe. "Hikari, are you oh crash Oe? If you foo, it appears Asia and Hikari have arrived," Akeno said with a grin of amusement on her face. The ponytailed queen walked towards the door, her giggles could easily be heard even as she tried to suppress them, and opened it even before the pair could knock. "I'm glad you could make it, you two." Akeno said with a smile as she watched the girls brush off their skirts. Thank you Akeno-senpai. Asia said with a bow to the older girl. Hey Akeno-ni-chan, Rias ni-chan, and lady I don't know. How are you? Hikari said happily bouncing in place, only to have to grab Akeno and Asia's shoulders as she started to lose her balance. Mew, legs are so hard to use. I don't see how you all make it look so easy, the girl said as she lifted her ankle-length baby blue skirt to reveal two humanoid legs that were covered in dark purple snake scales. Asia blushed a bit and gasped rushing forward, she pushed the skirt from the girl's hands. Hikari-chan you can't do that. It's indecent. The ex-nun exclaimed, causing the two girls that knew her to giggle, while Sona stared in slight confusion. It's fine Asia-chan, it's only us girls here right now so no need to get worked up. Rias explained, even as her smile seemed to grow more natural from the two's antics. And Hikari-chan, legs are natural for us, so we don't find it awkward to use them. If we were suddenly given Lamia bodies, we would have just as much difficulty moving as you are. That's why Naruto wanting you to have a full weekend to adjust, which you are doing quite rapidly. Ria's pride in the young girl could be heard quite clearly, causing the purple hair girl to blush from the praise. Hikari-chan, when the spell was earlier you didn't have scales on your legs, so why do you have them now? Akeno asked, as she remembered the spell clearly. She had learned it right after the blonde boy had finished it. Hikari laughed nervously. Well I knew Nai-san would always be around so I cast it myself this morning. Oh my, that is quite impressive for your first time casting it. Akeno said equally as proud of the girl they all had taken in as a sister. Well, actually this is my third try to get this spell on my legs. Hikari admitted in embarrassment, her blush not leaving her cheeks. The first time it only split my tail in two, second time I had feet at the end of my tails. Third cast took pretty much all the magic I had left to get this. Her head hanging down in slight shame. That is still really impressive as that was the first spell you've learned and it is a rather complicated spell. Akeno insisted, a large smile on her face backing up her words. Hikari got her own smile as she heard her Ni-chan's praise. However, as you need to wear a uniform skirt, how about I finish this spell of yours and we can work on your casting after classes today. Hikari nodded with a large grin. Oh before you three go, I'd like to introduce you to an old friend of mine. Sona, here is the student council president and a fellow high-class devil. Rias said to the two newest girls. While at school please refer to me as Shitori-sama. She said with a polite bow. Sona this is Argento Asia, she's an ex-nun who's taken up the position of bishop in my peerage. The blonde bowed deeply to the high-class devil. Naruto calls her Goldie. Rias added on, knowing that her friend needed to know so wouldn't have Naruto calling her out on it. Ah nice to meet you Argento-sama. Sona said with a bit of a grimes. Ah no, it is a pleasure to meet you Sitri-sama, but you don't need to call me Sama Asia said while waving her hands in front of her. Yufufufu, I'm afraid she does Asia-chan. Akeno said, holding a hand over her mouth in a vain attempt to hide her laughter. Asia and Hikari both looked at the pony-tailed queen with questioning looks, making Akeno giggle more before she explained. Sitri-sama made a bet with Ghosty-kun, so anyone he nicknames she has to refer to as Sama until he says otherwise. A look of understanding dawned on the two girls' faces before a big smile bloomed on Hikari's face as she tried to step forward to greet the pink-eyed devil, she almost tripped again, having to windmill her arms until she wasn't going to fall over. Catching her balance once more and ignoring Akeno's giggles, Hikari turned to Sona with a big smile. Hi, my name's Hikari, nice to meet you. The girl chirped while waving hyperactively. I hope we can be friends. It is nice to meet you as well Hikari-san. Sona said with a small bow of her head. You're too stiff, you should relax Sona-ni-chan. Hikari said back with a pout, already deciding that if she was Ria's friend she was going to be a Ni-chan as well. Rias almost started laughing at Sona's stupefied look but held herself back so she could cut off anything that might transpire between the two. She had enough problems between her blonde rook and her friend she didn't want to deal with anymore. Sona, this is Uzumaki Hikari, Naruto's adopted sister. She could already see lights going on in her friend's eyes, the girl had only been around a month, but from being near Naruto that whole time, she'd already picked up a few of his quirks, just mixed with her perky attitude. Ah, I'm sorry Uzumaki-sama, I didn't realize as who you were. Sona said, trying to correct her lack of sama last time she addressed the girl. Rias Ni-chan would you do that, she was just saying my name normally. Hikari whined as she realized her connection to her brother figure caused her to be addressed so stiffly. Sorry Hikari-chan, but you don't want her to get in trouble with your Nai-san do you? Hikari still pouted a bit before relenting no, she finally said. Ifufu, come on Hikari-chan, let's get you fixed up for your first day of school. Akeno said as she helped the girl walk out the door. Hikari waved as she left while Asia gave a quick bow and left as well. Anyway Rias-sama I really should be getting back to the council office. I'll see you at lunch to set up a time for our match. The black-haired king said to her rival. Okay Sona-san, see you then. Rias agreed before her oldest friend disappeared out the door. Once she was gone, Rias got a small frown on her face, although it was very small. Something had changed in her friendship with Sona. The redhead couldn't tell what it was, but she felt something was off when they had talked. Sighing, the crimson-haired girl leaned back and stared up at the ceiling. She had so much on her mind right now that she was having trouble keeping it all straight. Naruto clapped his hands together, as if to knock off any dirt, while he walked away from his latest handiwork. Behind him, hanging once more from a rope, were the perverted trio, although this time all they had were their shirts tied around their waists like diapers and pacifiers taped in their mouths. They'd even managed to tape their hands closed around a rattle each, while their free hands were just taped into fists. All three were tied with their backs to each other, before they were tied up at the same height as last time. On Monday, he'd caught the three ogling Asia when she was talking with his sister before class, so he thought he'd be nice and warn them away from trying anything on the girl. It was now Wednesday and he'd already caught them trying to peep before the nuns' gym class. Just as last time, he didn't give them a chance to see who caught them, though he had a feeling Hyoto would know. He'd warned the boy that it would only get worse if they didn't shape up. Just like last time, he'd left another note hanging below them. This one said, "We were caught peeping again. We are slow learners, so we're in a timeout." He was glad he got this done now, as he could slip away without anyone noticing and grab some lunch before he had to be back to watch Ria's match. She'd made it a point to ask everyone if they could come to watch. Naruto noticed that the red-haired girl an odd twitch when she asked him, and Kaneko, who'd seated herself in the middle of his lap but refrained from acknowledging it. He really hadn't wanted to go, even asked why she wanted him there, saying he was going to skip today to practice his alchemy. She pouted and asked him to please come. With that and Kaneko's incessant poking his thigh, he buckled. Truthfully, he would have buckled to her pleading pretty quickly. He just didn't like watching sports much, finding them pretty boring. That being said, he didn't really have to be seen by anyone other than the club members. He was planning on letting them see him, then hiding somewhere so he could read while keeping an eye on the game. It took quite a bit of work for him to stop the people from looking for him after his lunch with the club, something that Rias tried to repeat and Azazel wouldn't let him live down. Keeping his head down and out of sight, which was difficult during and at the end of classes, paid off, and soon the rumors about him started to fade. He had no desire to become some second prince of school or be called a delinquent that was forcing them to be with him, mostly because teenager rumor mills can easily run either way. While rumors for idiots didn't bother him too much, reputations did follow a person all through their life, and he didn't want to have to move to escape being labeled something he wasn't. This of course didn't stop Rias and Akeno for having fun with what others saw, something that made his disappearing much harder than it needed to be. Rias was very much happy to say that he joined their club and was very helpful and smart and pretty much blowing sunshine about him to everyone in earshot. Akeno however liked to blush and smile while insinuating all sorts of things about the kisses they'd given him. Haneko was the only one that sort of helped him in his disappearing act, not much, she just didn't talk about him to anyone. Everyone that had asked her about the kiss, she simply pointed at the asker and said pervert. Before turning and walking away. After the fifth person got the cold shoulder from the girl, they learned to stop asking about it. Udo had his own set of problems to deal with. Apparently the smaller blonde's little show while asking for help training caused a bigger stir among the school than the kisses did. Naruto couldn't say he was overly surprised by this, considering almost 80% of the school was girls. As such, the prince was the hot topic, not some blonde boy nobody ever really sees or knows anything about, though he could freely admit being referred to as Kuo's resident ghost. Did raise an eyebrow or two when he heard it. He had gathered some attention when he would meet Hikari after school to walk her to the club room, though he had mostly brushed that off as having Asia and Kaneko following with him to meet the girl. Since the rescue, both girls had been stuck to his sides like glue whenever they could, something that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. Naruto personally wanted to chalk it up to them needing to get over a traumatic event. He'd taken to getting a few hours rest in his study the last few nights, because Sunday night his bed was full of other bodies before he could even get into it. Hikari had made jokes of it, saying he was so popular he should just make his whole bedroom one large bed so it could fit the whole household, or talking about group weddings. The fact that Kaneko and Akeno looked actually thoughtful about that comment disturbed the boy enough that he closed himself into his study for a complete night, burying himself in his magic studies. Shaking himself clear of his thoughts, the boy slowed his pace so as to not draw attention to himself. He had just arrived at the sports field where he was supposed to watch the tennis matches. As he had approached from where the locker rooms were, Naruto arrived from behind the 8-tier white bleachers. The 3 tennis courts were set inside a 10-foot-high chain-link fence, all having red ground covering, something that looked like dyed red asphalt to the blonde ninja, with spray-painted white lines on the ground to mark the courts. The line of trees surrounded the back and sides of the fenced-in area, giving shade and some measure of solitude to allow the players to focus without cutting the area off from the rest of the grounds. Smirking faintly, Naruto moved away from the rapidly filling bleachers and found a shaded area that gave him view of the courts and audience without being easily seen. As usual, it was an area that was out in the open but easily overlooked. He'd just been able to pull out his alchemy book. He said he'd come, not that he wouldn't still be trying to learn a skill that interested him as much as seals did, when he felt a familiar weight drop into his lap. "Hello, kitten. Naruto-senpai. Good day." "Hi. Your work?" When Kaneko asked this, she pointed towards where the girls' locker room was. "Their fault." Naruto responded with a shrug, finally managing to dig his alchemy book out and open it. "Sitri-senpai will be upset." "Not allowed." Kaneko looked confused, as she knew that Sona was just as protective of her servants as Rias, even if she showed less compassion about it. Naruto shot a look to the girl when he didn't hear her say anything, but did feel her move a bit. Seeing her look at him with her question in her eyes, Naruto answered her unasked question. "The bet. She's not allowed to be upset for anything I do." The Nekashu thought back to the bet Naruto had with Sona. The first part said she wasn't allowed to demand anything of him, so while she could get upset she couldn't do anything about it. So basically, even if Sona does know that Naruto had done this prank against Issei, she was not able to call him on it, therefore stopping her from expressing any displeasure. Nodding her understanding, Kaneko turned back to the courts and pulled out some snacks for her to enjoy while she watched the match. She had just started to relax in her spot when she felt a comforting hazes fill her mind, causing her to release a slight purr while her eyes fell closed. Naruto hadn't even realized that he'd starting to absent-mindedly pet the girl's hair while he read his book, only noticing what he'd done when the girl fell back into his chest fast asleep. Blinking in surprise, Naruto cast a quick look around. Rias had yet to take to the court, so he still had time. None of the other students had noticed them yet, not even Yudo or Akeno. Assuming she was as tired as he felt, Naruto decided to let the white-haired girl rest. Maybe Kaneko feels that same protective big brother aura that Hikari was talking about. The confused blonde thought to himself as he felt Kaneko curl into his chest more. Lazily wrapping an arm around the girl to reach his book, the clueless blonde boy flipped the page and pushed the thoughts of why the white-haired girl was sleeping on him from his mind. It was a good 25 minutes later that Rias and Sona made their way into the courts. Naruto had shaken Kaneko awake as soon as he saw the pair. However, once he saw both of them starting to use magic in the game, he simply went back to reading his book, having lost any interest once it became a game of who can cheat and not let the humans catch you. He felt no surprise when the game was called a tie, though he had to admit he was impressed that they managed to keep the damage to a minimum. As the game had finished, he could see Rias looking around trying to find something or someone. Soon enough, Yudo, Asia and Akeno had come up next to the young women. The three had a quick conversation before they too started to look about, causing Naruto to shake his head. It was all too obvious who they were searching for. Getting Kaneko to stand, he moved himself into direct sunlight and waved to the three. Akeno was the first to see the pair and giggled at Naruto's bored wave, as he hadn't stopped reading as he waved. Kaneko was beside him as she stared intently at the three, as if she wanted them to know where she was simply by a look. Finally, Akeno got the other three to look to the side of the court and they all approached the two antisocial members of their club. Asia's smile lit up her face when she saw the blonde boy. "Why are you two over here?" Rias asked, still not understanding how some people simply couldn't handle having many others around them. "Got here early, so wanted to have a quiet, comfortable place to read." "Kitten joined me soon after," Naruto said easily, finally putting his book away. "So you were here the whole time to watch my tennis match?" Rias questioned happily. She wasn't sure why, but she felt more excited knowing that the dragon boy had been watching her. "Yeah, though I'm pretty sure you stopped playing tennis after the second serve and it suddenly became a game of racquetball." The boy countered with a smirk. "Don't you mean racquetball?" Yudo asked. "Nope, I mean racket," Naruto stated while pointing a finger at the destroyed tennis court. Even if the girls managed to contain the damage done, the whole court would need to be refloored. Akeno giggled as Rias blushed when she realized what happened while she got caught up in her game against Sona. "So was there a point to you playing this? Because you sure seemed into it for a simple match against your friendly rival." Rias sighed and nodded. "I sort of took a page out of your book and made a bet with her." She had most of her blush under control now that she was talking about her reasons rather than looking at the results of the bet. "Something that I'm fairly sure we are going to have to rediscuss as this match ended in a tie." Naruto raised an eyebrow when he heard he inadvertently helped make this mess. "Okay, now you have my attention. What's at stake?" The girl's eyes darted around for a second, looked for something before she came up with an answer. "Club resources. I'll explain the details over lunch in the club room." Naruto realized what she was alluding to easily, so he simply nodded. "I should tell you now, Sona and the student council will likely be there." Naruto's eye quickly started to drift off as he turned around to get his bag. "They may be late then," the boy said as he started to collect his belongings. "Why's that?" Rias asked, as she had been too focused on her match to notice her surroundings when she left the locker room. Perverts got caught again. Kaneko answered for the boy. You didn't see? Rias narrowed her eyes in thought from the Nekashu's question, trying to remember if she had seen anything. I don't recall anything, though I'll admit I was preoccupied with other thoughts. Oh, and what happened to them this time? Akeno asked with an impish grin. Oh, they're just having a time out. I'm sure Citri will find them hanging around. Naruto said with a bit of a smirk, getting a giggle from Akeno and a low chuckle from Yudo, while the princely blonde shook his head. I have pictures on my phone if you want to see. The blonde ninja offered. I'd rather know how you pull it off honestly. Ria said as she shook her head, she could already see the storm Sona was likely to cause from this. I'm ninja like that, Naruto said, giving the same answer he'd given Kaneko when she asked. Asia tilted her head in confusion, while the other three inside the fenced-off area all snapped their heads up towards the smirking blonde before they could question if he was serious, though they all saw Kaneko poking him in the ribs hard, a barely noticeable frown on her lips. Hey, stop it, kitten. Baka. The white-haired girl said while she continued to poke at the amused blonde. Ria sighed as the pair played around, she could honestly say she was jealous of the two. Giving a quick glance at the other two with her, she could see she wasn't the only one. While most couldn't see it, Rias had been with her queen long enough to notice the slight tightening around her eyes and strain she's putting into keeping her smile in place. Asia looked to be pouting slightly, as if she wanted to join the game while not sure she could. Rias and Akeno were also becoming very stressed from the lack of sleep. They'd become very used to sleeping next to the blonde ninja, but for the last few days he hadn't even been coming to bed. Several times, one or the other would slip out of bed and go looking for him, only to find him in his study working on one form of study or writing things out on a large journal. By morning, neither had been able to sleep much at all, and when they made it down for breakfast, Naruto was wide awake, intoning that he either gotten up fairly early or the more likely option if he hadn't slept at all. Naruto's light chuckles draw all of them from their thoughts as he gotten Kaneko to stop poking him. I guess we should head to the club room now then. Ria shook her head to clear away her feelings and thoughts, now wasn't the time. Yes, hopefully Sona will be calm enough when she arrives that we can get our business dealt with. Naruto shrugs as he and Kaneko turn to head toward the old school building. As long as she doesn't go back on our bet, Citri can't really say much. Naruto said as he moved away from the others, ignoring the fact that Kaneko had taken his hand as they walked. Yudo was quick to retreat when he felt Rias starting to release an angry aura of jealousy while staring at the retreating pair. Looking up, he decided it was best to run, as he could see mischief and planning going on in Akeno's eyes while she had joined the redhead in staring after the two. For all his quick wits and his extraordinarylifist learning curve, Naruto could be extremely dense when it came to some of life's common sense things and women. Watching from a safe distance, Yudo was the least affected by Naruto's joke. While he did wish to know if the blonde was really a ninja, he wasn't about to push for answers from his fellow blonde. He'd been honest with him when he asked his friend to help train him. Naruto could keep all the secrets he wanted, and Yudo wouldn't question him about them, as long as the other boy helped train him. Naruto had already kept up his half of the bargain, something Yudo could already feel and see, as while he could still barely move under the level 3 seal, when he was walking and moving normally he felt faster and lighter. Naruto's hand twitched very so slightly while he sat in his chair. He desperately wanted to have his book out so he could ignore everyone else in the room. The whole Citri Peerage was in the occult research club room with Rias Peerage. The redhead herself was currently seated on one of the couches directly across from her pink-eyed rival, while both girls' queen sat beside them. Yudo had taken up standing directly behind the red-haired devil, his back to the only window in the room, while the rest of Sona's known peerage stood behind her. The four slightly odd ones out were Kaneko, who was sitting on his lap as was normal for the girl, Asia, who was standing so close to the side of his chair, he was sure if she moved any closer she'd be sitting on the armrest. Hikari was standing behind his chair using the back to support her, as she was still having trouble with walking, even if she was getting used to her new leg fast, and finally, himself. The 8 members of Citri Peerage were all looking between the 2 high-class devils and himself with varying looks of nervousness and in one case annoyance. Naruto couldn't even bring himself to blame Issei for his annoyance either. The boy was likely the laughingstock of the school. He'd missed Sona's tennis match and caused them to be late for this meeting as they had to get him down and into proper clothing. That wasn't to say Naruto wouldn't do it again or worse if he caught the boy again or if he and the women's other pawn continued to stare at Asia with so much lust it could be smelled. As the 2 girls continued to talk about things over their tea, Naruto decided to take a more through look at the others in her peerage, as well he had seen them before he wasn't really paying them much attention. The girl closest to him was a tall girl with long white hair, with almost metallic blue-green eyes. Her domineer was slightly shy, but with a resolved stance that meant she was obviously nervous to be here, but held firm with her king. If his memory was right, this girl was Hanakai Momo, a girl that was in his and Yudo's grade and an apparent bishop for the Citri heiress. Next to Momo stood Sona's second bishop, a brown-haired and eyed girl by the name of Kusaka Rias. She seemed far more shy than Momo and seemed to cast shy looks towards Yudo every once in a while, even going so far as to twirl one of her fingers through her chest-length hair once in a while. Even Naruto couldn't miss the signs of her crush on his friend, which meant a lot as he rarely understood any human or former human behavior. Following the brunette was the reddish-brown-haired knight of the group. The girl could be seen barely holding back a fidget as she stood behind her king. This was something that Naruto understood as he remembered seeing this girl around and she was always moving. Megumi Tomo was a hyperactive bubbly girl who would sometimes spar with the kendo club, however she never joined from what he could recall. The last non-pawn of Sona's group was Yuri Tsubasa, who was a blue-haired and eyed rook. Tsubasa was the tallest of their group, coming up just short of his own height by only a couple of inches, and she gave off the feeling of a tomboy. She did have a very Bishounen face much like Yudo's looks. The only female pawn Sona had was a first year by the name of Nomura Haruko, who was doing much like Rias, only her glances were sent towards the blonde-haired pawn next to her. Haruko had waist-length brown hair that was pulled back into two ponytails and bright happy green eyes. She was also the most nervous one of their group and make a point of keeping the blonde pawn, whom she kept glancing at, between her and Naruto. The blonde pawn was Seiji Genshiro. Naruto only need one look at the boy, who was staring at Asia, to know that Genshiro was a blonde-haired, gray-eyed, slightly taller version of Issei. Naruto didn't like the boy one bit. He had to stop his examination of Sona's peerage when he felt Hikari tapping him lightly on the shoulder. Giving a glance up, he saw her point over to Rias and Sona. Both of them were looking at him, Rias with slight worry, Sona with confusion. "Sorry, I was lost in thought," Naruto said, as he barely held in a yawn. "It's okay, Naruto-kun, are you okay?" Rias asked, her worry for the boy clear in her voice. "I'm fine, Red, just haven't slept since Sunday," Naruto said, waving off her concern with an easygoing smile. "What's up?" "Sona and I have come to an agreement, sort of. We want to finish our bet by facing both our peerages in a dodgeball game this Friday after classes," Rias explained. Everyone else agreed, but you seem to have zoned out. Rias withheld that she had only asked her peerage and Hikari if they agreed to the match, something she'd only really started getting into the habit of doing after Naruto had joined. It was also something that she found surprised the others at first, but made all of them happier. While she didn't second-guess herself in battle, she had started to ask their opinion more often. Naruto looked up at his adopted sister. The girl had a happy and excited look on her face that seemed to make her almost glow with joy. Making a quick glance at the nun that looked equally excited for the game, Naruto looked back to the redhead and nodded as well. She seemed to have gotten the others into it, so he wasn't about to ruin their fun just because he thought the game was boring. Sure, might as well. Winners will go right from there to the forest, I take it. Rias gave a happy grin while nodding. She was glad he didn't make much of a fuss over the game, as she was expecting to have to try and convince him to join. "Uzumaki-sama, if I may, is there something bothering you?" Sona asked, as she could clearly see he was still very distracted, both her and Naruto easily ignoring the grumbling from her peerage at her having to still refer to him as Sama. "Nothing you need to concern yourself over, Citri-san, it's mostly family matters," Naruto said airily, waving her worry off. "I see," Sona said before letting the matter drop for now. While she knew there was more to it, there was little more she would get out of him. She would just have to try to regain her standing in his eyes before she could be trusted with anything else, something she found exceedingly odd to have to do. Pushing the thoughts from her mind for now, she turned her head back towards Rias, who also appeared worried over the whiskered blonde. "Rias-sama, as I believe there is little more we have to talk about in regards to the match, I believe it best for us to retire from this meeting for now." "I agree. I look forward to our match on Friday," the red-haired devil said with a large smirk, one that was matched by the Citri heiress. "I hate you so much right now," Yudo said as he flopped down in the middle of the living room of Naruto's house. The other male of the group was only grinning mercilessly at the Bishounen boy, while Kaneko just stared blankly at the fallen knight. The three had been training for several hours, Kaneko and Naruto in hand-to-hand fighting, while the knight was trying to still walk in level 3 gravity seal. Kaneko's evil rook piece allowed for her to handle the gravity training far better than Yudo's knight, which was more speed-focused. So while both were now training at level 3, Kaneko was already learning fighting styles from Naruto that could complement each other, while Yudo was just trying to relearn how to walk. The kicker for Yudo was that Naruto ended today's training earlier than normal to fulfill his promise to his first multi-year client and kept his word to the knight by drag him along. Yudo had completely forgotten about Naruto's threat to take him along, and Naruto hadn't released the seal to allow Yudo to run away. Kaneko just came along to see what the fuss was about, as she hadn't been in the room when Naruto had returned from that client. "I told you I was taking you with me when I went next. I forgot with everything else that was going on." "Not my problem." You're a bastard. Most likely, but I really don't care. Naruto said with a wide, evil grin on his face. Yudo could very well be considered his best male friend, and he knew the little princely asshole was the reason for his sudden jump in female contractors. He couldn't prove it, but the sudden spike in hormonal teenage women being able to summon him was very much not to his liking, and Yudo was the most popular male in school. So what do you want to turn this damn thing off? The ragged-looking knight asked while he finally managed to roll onto his back. Naruto lifted his hands into a hand seal while spiking his chakra. With a quiet Kai, Yudo and Kaneko both felt the weight lifted from their bodies, allowing Yudo to release an explosive sigh of relief. Kaneko's was much softer, but even she sighed happily while the tension left her shoulders. How'd you do it? Naruto asked while he stared intently at his fellow blonde in the room. Yudo opened one eye as he smirked up at the other boy. Do what, ghosty? Naruto raised an eyebrow at Yudo using Akeno's name for him. The contract's asshat. Yudo snorted aloud at Naruto's insult, while Kaneko had to hold back her own snort behind her small smirk. Whatever do you mean? Live it up, I know it's you that's making all those horny girls get a hold of my summoning circle. How? And why are they willing to summon me, not you? Kaneko suddenly became very interested in the answer to that, glaring intently at the one smirking blonde. With both Rooks staring down on him with hard looks, Yudo started to sweat. Called you my big brother and sorta implied that they had to impress you for me to consider dating them? Yudo asked while he was slinking back into a wall from the combined glares. Naruto started getting a twitch in his eye. Finally, after a few minutes, he just face-palmed and muttered to himself about perverted uncles and corruptible knights. Fine, prank, well played, prep. Yudo visibly deflated in his relief from having the blonde stop glaring at him, though Kaneko still didn't look pleased. However, you do know this means war, right? Threatened Naruto. A rapidly paling blonde said as he looked up to the whiskered dragon wearing the most evil and frightening grin he'd ever seen in his life, and could only wonder if he should have ignored Oz's advice on how to get Naruto back for all the times he'd disappeared on the night. He knew he should have when Kaneko's once hard look suddenly became one of pity. I'm so fucked, was his only thought. Naruto and Yudo stood side by side as they overlooked their teammates for the dodgeball game. Yudo was trying desperately to hold back his laughter, while Naruto's eyebrow was twitching dangerously. On the other end of the court, Issei and Genshiru were staring lustfully at the same thing as the two blondes. All the females were stretching to ready themselves for the game. Well, this wasn't bad in and of itself, as it would prevent many injuries. They were doing so in tight girls' bloomer shorts, which were the reason the two perverted pawns were staring and drooling on the floor. However, that was not the reason for Naruto's twitch or Yudo's withheld laughter. The reason for that was, like the student council's oddly homemade headbands, all the girls had decided they wanted to wear something matching. As such, they decided to raid Naruto's t-shirt stock and were now all wearing matching flame print t-shirts of varying colors, along with their shorts. Although they did look cute in the shirts, especially Kaneko and Asia, whom the shirts covered almost like a dress, Rias and Akeno looked far too self-satisfied in the clothing. Why are they all in my shirts? Why do you have so many matching shirts? Yudo shot back. On sale and they looked cool. Naruto answered back without really thinking about it. Really? 672 yen a shirt, and considering how many shirts I destroy in training. Naruto trailed off as a look of understanding came over Yudo's face, as even he had started to need new shirts while training with Naruto. Still doesn't answer my question as to why they're wearing my shirts. They're women, why the hell are you asking me? Yudo asked. Well, with your pretty boy looks you could almost pass. Naruto had to stop and dodge sideways as Yudo attempted to smack him in the back of the head. Ass. I know, it's sexy. Naruto said with an infuriating smirk. But sorry, I only like girls, prep. Yudo had his turn to twitch this time as he glared at his friend's smirking form before calming down and tilting his head to the side. Really? Cause I've never seen you with a girlfriend. You're one to talk, almost every girl in this school would drop their panties at your smile, and yet you've never even given one of them a second look. Naruto countered before he stopped and thought for a second. Granted, almost all of them are the evil fangirl, both boys shuddered from the word. Variety, but not all of them. Yudo deadpanned at the other boy. The fangirl's shudder would eat any girl I ask out alive. So I've avoiding doing so till I'm away from them. Naruto snorted loudly at the boy. Good luck with that. He said before he took a second to take stock of the gymnasium they were to play the dodgeball game in. Well, the area was a large concrete and stone brick room lit by fluorescent lights. It was painted to make the room seem larger and brighter than it truly was. The floor was painted a fleshy peach tone with many black, white and red circles and lines throughout the room. The retracted basketball hoops along either wall gave way for Naruto to know who normally used this gym. The white walls reflected a great deal of the light from the ceiling, allowing everyone to know they had been painted recently, something that indicated to the blonde that this room was both in regular use and in high demand. Ah no, aren't you going to stretch, Naruto-san? Are you ever going to drop the san from my name? Naruto asked back as he smiled lightly at the blonde nun as he and Yuto approached the group. Asia smiled with a light blush on her cheeks, unable to stop herself from playing with the hem of his shirt that she was wearing. I jogged here with prep so I'm plenty stretched out Goldie. Oh, I was hoping you'd put on a show for us ladies, we did so for you ghosty-kun. Akeno said with a flirtatious smirk. Naruto could almost see her trying to bait him into another one of her traps, even as Issei and Genshiru were prepared to do any showing needed to see more. Seeing a chance to crush their hopes and hopefully stop their annoying lust-filled stares at his friends, he smirked before speaking a little louder than truly necessary to be heard. And I was hoping one of you would mind explaining why everyone other than Prep here is wearing my shirts. He couldn't help the vindictive smirk that appeared on his lips as he saw both Sona's perverted pawns suddenly appear crouching in the corner of the room with storm clouds above their heads. He was brought back to reality when he felt Asia tug lightly on the sleeve of his shirt while looking down shyly. "Oh no, I'm sorry for taking your shirt without asking, Hikari-chan said you wouldn't mind and we should all wear them as a team." She slowly raised her head to look at him, her face that of a horribly sad puppy that would have shattered heart if you didn't give it all your attention and love. "Please don't be upset. There should be a law outlawing that look, it's just not fair." Naruto thought before he sighed exasperatingly, gently laying one of his hands on the small ex-nun's golden locks and patting her head. "I'm not upset, just confused. Why my shirts? I'm pretty sure the one kitten's wearing was the one I wore to bed last night," Naruto said before he turned his eyes towards his sister hoping she'd explain. Had he looked towards the other girls he would have noticed the looks of envy Kaneko was getting from several of the girls. The Lamia girl with legs just grinned at her brother before giving him the victory hand symbol. "Paid back for the other morning my dear Ani-chan. Now we're even for you walking around the house naked." Again the Uzumaki siblings totally missed the blushing glaze-eyed looks on the girls' faces. "Stop letting people strip me in my sleep and that wouldn't happen," Naruto said trying to vainly defend himself. "Oh like I can stop the number of girls that crawl into your bed and strip you," Hikari declared, ignoring how that statement knocked both perverted pawns out with matching nosebleeds. Nobody paid their mothers of lucky bastard any mind as they simply left them there for the moment. "Okay, stop you two," Rias said with a soft and amused smile on her lips. "As much as I'd love to let you two continue we have to start this game before the night is over." Naruto blinked, having forgotten where they were in his game with Hikari. "Oh yeah." Shrugging he walked toward the court where everyone else was waiting, stopping only long enough to rub Kaneko's head. "So I just have to not get hit right?" Naruto asked with a laid-back air about him, he was trying to get the other side to underestimate him, not hard, but by the looks of the perverts on the other side, he didn't have to try hard anyway. Really the only two that fell for his act were the perverted pawns. They had matching looks in their eyes as they picked up a set of balls to throw at him as soon as the game started. Once the whistle was blown both boys threw their weapons at the lazing boy to try and get him out, only for the ninja to catch them with an evil grin and mischievous look in his eyes. "You perverts need to learn to keep your balls where they belong," Naruto called before firing the balls back at the two, aiming below the belt on both. "Evil," Kaneko said, with a small note of amusement in her voice. "That was just brutal ghost," Yuto said, having decided until he came up with a better name, he was just going to stick with the one Akeno called Naruto. The game had ended about 10 minutes ago and everyone had returned to their normal clothes. Except Kaneko and Akeno, who still wore Naruto's t-shirts. Though from the looks of Rias and Asia he doubted he'd see any of those t-shirts again. But very amusing. Akeno herself added, a small amount of lust in her voice, she slid up beside the decided victor of the dodgeball game. Naruto was pulled away before she could get too close to him by a determined-looking Kaneko. You're no fun Kaneko-chan. They had it coming, I didn't like the way they were looking at the girls, so I had to remind them of their place," Naruto said simply. He held firm in his ignoring the by-play between the girls in the group as he was sure it would only confuse him more if he tried to understand them. Yuto snorted as he stood beside his best friend. "I didn't say it was underserved, only that it was brutal. You made a point to aim so that if they stood up the ball would find a way to hit them in the nuts again. I've never seen a guy cry that much in one afternoon. I only hit them once, the rest was just their bad karma coming back to bite them," Naruto said trying, and failing, to look innocent. Yuto and everyone there snorted loudly when he said that. "Right," the princely blonde said before he looked back to their team medic who was healing the injured boys as best she could. "Asia-chan, we need to get going," the knight called out, drawing her away from the light healing she was doing to the two. "Alright, coming Kiba-san," the nun said before bowing to the two boys politely before rushing over to Naruto's side, not even giving the two boys a second look. Even as they stared longingly at her retreating form until they saw Naruto's hard glare at them. The rest of their conversations were cut off as Rias approached the group. Her satisfied smirk allowed everyone to know she was enjoying having her peerage dominate Sona's, as only Asia had gotten out, and that was more of a fluke, as the nun had tripped and fallen into the ball, rather than been hit. The kendo smiled as she started up the magic circle once she saw Rias approach. "Is everything ready but you?" "Yes, Akeno, we can leave once everyone here is ready," Rias said before turning to the rest of the group. "Are you?" She was still having to remind herself to ask once in a while, but she believed she was getting better, and from the shocking results Yuto has having from Naruto's training, she was completely convinced it was worth the effort to stop thinking of any of her peerage as her servants. Though I don't think it should be this hard to remember. The following course of highs and one lazy sure. From a distracted and whiskered blonde following the question was all Akeno needed to hear before she activated her spell. The first thing Naruto noticed when he arrived in the forest they'd been transported to was that he could feel like it was breathing. There was so much energy everywhere around him it was staggering to him. He knew if he tried to activate his fox eyes he'd likely end up blinded. It both amazed him and unnerved him as not having his advanced eyesight could hamper him if something was to attack him right now. The energy was also darker than he was used to, making the air slightly chilly. The dusk-like sky cast a red hue across the almost black trees that surrounded them on all sides, adding to the effect. In seconds after appearing here Naruto felt Asia latch onto his arm while shivering in fright, while on the other side, Hikari was holding on to the hem of his shirt. "Well, isn't this a welcoming place?" the whiskered blonde remarked sarcastically, cutting through the tense atmosphere with ease. Even as the others laughed Naruto could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise, something was already watching him. "This is the familiar forest in the underworld Naruto-kun, the atmosphere here is to be expected," Rias said as she sent a disarming smile to the nervous girls. "There's nothing to be afraid of, this area of the forest is completely safe. You just jinxed us, I hope you know that," Naruto remarked flatly. Rias just laughed. "Oh, relax, we've been here lots of times. Each of us had to come here to get our own familiars, plus we have a familiar master meeting us just up ahead, what could go wrong? And now we're fucked," Naruto said with a groan. He could already see himself coming back after a series of horrifying and embarrassing events happen. "I reserve the right to say I told you so when the shit hits the fan." Red Rias laughed lightly until she turned around to see everyone was giving her deadpan looks, causing her laughter to slowly die awkwardly. Naruto's head shot sideways and glared up into a tree at the side of the walking path ahead of them. "The stare is creepy, bud, get out here. Gotta catch 'em all. No more Pokemon for you." Hikari screamed as a man jumped down from the tree Naruto had been glaring at. The man looked to be middle-aged but was an off-white sleeveless shirt, a large yellow backpack, blue backwards baseball cap, beige cargo shorts, and wore hiking boots. The Uzumaki siblings both had rather clear twitches in their eyebrows as the reddish-brown-haired man looked like he was trying to rip off a Pokemon character but was very over the hill and refused to let go. 5,000 yen says he's a pervert, the girl whispered to her brother figure. "No bet, I already caught him leering at you girls," Naruto muttered back, his glare not letting up on the over-the-hill Ash wannabe. "I'm Zatouji, the familiar master. I can catch any familiar," the now-named Zatouji called out, puffing himself up as if trying to impress the women of the group. "Old Pokemon perv," Naruto muttered. He lost interest in the man after that as he could still feel something in the area almost hunting him, but as no one else seemed to notice he was almost tempted to put it off as paranoia. "This is the point when I'd have vanished normally," the blonde thought with narrowed eyes. He was not used to having this many people near him and it was started to bother him more and more each day. Having them basically hanging off him like two were now just drove his instinctive need to attack into overdrive and now he could feel a presence stalking him. The group started to walk deeper into the forest following the still talking familiar master. He had started telling them all about the different types of familiar they could get, the varying abilities they displayed and elemental affinities they could have. "So what type of familiars are you looking for?" the man asked while he finally stopped in a large clearing with a small pond near the end of it. No, I'd like something cute please," Asia asked shyly, stepping slightly away from Naruto in order to be seen. "Of course you can," the man responded, puffing himself up as if he could do anything. The man looked around. "You're in luck, there happens to be an undine connected to this pond. I'll call her out for you," the devil said as he pranced over to the pond while digging for something in his backpack. Suddenly all moments stopped as everyone felt the something dark enter the clearing, a low but deep growl echoing off the trees. Everyone's eyes slowly moved toward the far side of the area as the shadows seemed to become darker and collect into one spot. Naruto slowly released himself from Hikari's hold while he moved in front of the group. He knew this thing was here for him as it had been since he entered the forest. "Nai-chan?" the younger Uzumaki asked watching her brother figure move to meet the slowly forming mass of shadows. "Finally showing yourself?" Naruto asked aloud as the mass started to take shape. The shadows seemed to run down the being's form like black oil, clearing a way to show what looked to be a black wolf with shots of red highlighting its coat. The wolf stood at least 5 feet high on the shoulders and 2.5 feet wide, however the two most defining features were the glowing green eyes that lit up the clearing and the 4 massive black and red feathered wings coming from the wolf's back. The monarch! Zataoji yelled out in shock seeing the massive wolf, which was currently in a glaring contest with Naruto. The what? Rias asked in worry. She'd never heard nor seen anything like this beast before. Everyone else was listening while they were preparing to fight the beast, should it attack. It's a monarch shadow wolf, the strongest breed of shadow wolves, or any elemental wolves for that matter. Nobody really knows where they come from or how they're born, though some rumors say they are the direct descendants of Hati son of Fenrir. One is only seen every 500 to 1000 years. The only way not to be attacked when you see one is to bow in submission and pray it doesn't see you as a threat. Zataoji explained. He was already getting to his knees while he explained this. Rias could already tell this was not going to be a pleasant night, nor was she going to get home without having to listen to Naruto's mocking "I told you so." "I still don't believe I jinxed us," Rias said while she glared at the blonde boy as he started to release an aura of blood-red chakra. She knew she and the others wouldn't have to bow, the wolf was solely focused on the one being that would rather die than bow. "Keep telling yourself that, Red," Naruto said while kept staring at the wolf. Then it happened. The horse-sized wolf lunged forward at the dragonkin boy fangs bared. Naruto met the attack with a chakra-enforced raising kick to snap the beast's mouth closed before both were dragged into the shadows and disappeared. From inside a cave deep within the mountain range bordering the familiar forest, a large golden eye slowly opened. The silted iris narrowing as the being awoke from its slumber, searching the surroundings for what caused it to awaken. Slowly lifting its head from the ground, crystalline blue scales shone in the moonlight. The massive western dragon slowly crawled from its resting place to scan the forest more closely. "What is this feeling? It feels like office, yet different." The dragon thought as it tried to locate where the feeling was coming from. The majestic blue dragon was none other than the Chaos Karma dragon, only female of the Dragon Kings, Tiamat. She slowly descended the mountain its cave was located in, while sniffing the air to try and find the source of strange energy without the cause getting away. Suddenly, in the distance from the devil's entrance to the forest, she felt a spike of the power accompanied with a feeling of emptiness before it receded again. Narrowing her eyes, Tiamat shifted her form into a smaller size before taking flight to track down the power that seemed both familiar and foreign. Naruto fell backward while holding his leg up, keeping the beast's mouth shut as it sailed over the falling blonde, swinging up with both arms. As his head neared the ground, Naruto shot up a second kick to the beast's chest. Once the wolf was completely above him, Naruto's hands hit ground and his second leg joined his first in finding contact with the shadow wolf's body. The blow sending the beast clear across the new clearing they had ended up in. Finishing his flip, Naruto was back to his feet and facing his opponent before the large creature landed from its impromptu flight. Fists clenched and adrenaline pumping, the blonde boy gave chase to the large predator to keep up his attack, only to be left flat-footed as the wolf touched a shadow and disappeared. Sliding into a defense stance, the whiskered ninja quickly started scanning the clearing for any sign of the wolf, as he knew it wouldn't be over with one attack. This is going to get annoying quickly. The boy thought as he kept his eyes sharp, not enjoying this turnabout as he was the one that often appeared from the shadows to attack. Trusting his instincts, Naruto closed his eyes while slipping 2 kunai into his hands in reverse grips. Feeding chakra into the kunai, he waited only a second before his eyes flashed open and he spun around. Slashing out with his left hand, he watches a solid tentacle of shadow was shredded. The boy hopped to his right with a spin and slashed out with his right hand, this time slicing into the wolf, only for it to shred around into shadows as well. Narrowing his eyes as he saw more shadows start to condense into the forms of wolves and weaving coils, Naruto knew he needed to stop the wolf's ability to control shadows if he wanted to end this quickly and return to the others. Pulling in the burning chakra aura, Naruto released his wings and called on his void flames. Waves of fire flashed off of him, feeding on the massive amounts of energy in the air, as well as the magic the wolf had fed into the shadows to give them form. The blaze had only just been released, and all of the constructs his opponent had created fell to pieces, but Naruto knew something was wrong. The flames vanished as the blonde dragonkin fell to his knees, coughing and clutching his chest in pain, blood leaking from his lips, even as he tried desperately to stem the cough. Calling up his chakra once more, he focused it in and around his chest, hoping desperately that his regenerating would fix the problem, or at the very least stop the cough till he finished the fight. As the blood-red chakra cloaked his body once more, Naruto felt the pain from his chest ease off, but couldn't help but glare at the blood that had fallen to the ground in front of him. Pushing the pain from his mind, Naruto reclaimed the fallen kunai and stood back to his feet, already scanning for his enemy once more. He already knew he was at a major disadvantage because he could no longer use his void flames to neutralize the beast's shadow powers, and the wolf had brought him here, so it had chosen a place where the shadows were abundant. Seeing a gleam of green shining down on him, Naruto snarled up into the branches of one of the nearby trees, where an equally snarling four-winged shadow wolf stood glaring down at him. Coming up with an idea to counter the advantage the beast had given itself, Naruto started drawing up his magic before he returned the kunai from his right hand back into his sleeve. Keeping a careful watch on the wolf as it jumped down from the tree and started circling him, Naruto carefully reached into a hidden pocket of his coat and pulled out several shuriken. The wolf stopped circling, while Naruto kept his eyes locked with the beast, keeping his mind focused. No, several things at once was almost giving the boy a headache, but he felt it once he had his spell ready. With a low growl, the monarch shadow wolf lunged at Naruto again, just as the boy threw his throwing stars at it. As if repeating the same attack as their first exchange, Naruto once again shot a raising kick into the wolf's lower jaw, however this time as soon as contact was made both beings disappeared in a flash of black, reappearing 70 feet in the air. His wings already out, the blonde ninja finished his flip kick before stabilizing himself in the air. The wolf managed to stop his own flight as well, though not as gracefully as Naruto. By fully extending its wings he showed that they weren't just for decoration, despite how out of place they seemed to be. Growling at the cause of its pain, the wolf opened its mouth and started pooling all of its dark power there, forming a large bowl of power to collect. Naruto stared blankly for a second as he watched a large beast start calling up a massive amount of power in front of its mouth. In that moment the large wolf seemed to be overlapped with multiple animals doing the same stance, only with small balls of blue and red condensing into a large black orb in front of them. Seeing a different attack happening, but expecting the same results, Naruto let himself drop. He had just managed to get out of the way as the beam-type attack shot past him, burning his coat sleeve and wing, causing him to focus his chakra cloak to heal it quickly. Clear from the blast's path, Naruto snapped his wings open, ignoring the shooting pain from the rapidly healing one, and swooped around on a collision course for the still recovering wolf beast. This action didn't go unnoticed by the tired but aggravated animal, which turned and started to fly to meet the dragonkin in mid-flight. The impact caused a blast wave of shadow energy and chakra to explode out before both beings were sent crashing back into the ground beneath them. Tiamat watched in amusement as a hatchling part dragon being fought with a local monarch shadow wolf. When she had first arrived, she hadn't expected to see the two trying to duel each other in midair, as it seemed out of their elements. She had originally thought for a moment the part dragon was a devil that Office had empowered. That thought was discarded once she got a better look at the boy's wings, which were clearly draconic in origin, not demonic. The chakra glowing around the blonde also threw off her thoughts on whom he was as well. As far back as she would remember, only Yaokai had any form of chakra, not dragons, and his chakra was far thicker than any Yaokai she's ever met. His was very befitting for a dragon, however the chakra didn't enhance his draconic smell, which if it was his main power it should have. Had he been empowered by Office, her scent would have been all over him right now, but she couldn't find a trace of it on him. "You little hatchling are a mystery," Tiamat whispered quietly as she flew closer to where the blonde had landed, hoping to see more from him. But the main group right after Naruto was taken. "What do you mean, you can't find him?" Rias growled at the shaking and stuttering familiar master, a halo of blackish-red power of destruction outlining her form. Exactly, that GG Germari-sama. Zataoji barely got out while he crab walked his fallen form backwards into a tree, trying to get away from the many angry women bearing down on him. No one can track a shadow wolf unless they have a greater control of shadows, and since that was a monarch, there isn't a being alive with a greater control of shadows. The girls all took another step forwards towards the man, each with their individual powers coating their forms, from arcs of thunder jumping across Akeno's body to aura of malice around Kaneko. Before the group could try to get a better answer from the shivering guide, a hollowing wave of energy washed over them before disappearing, calming the worried girls significantly. The wave had the reverse effect on Zataoji, however, as he now looked more panicked and fearful. "What was that? Aren't you supposed to be the one that knows everything about what's in the forest?" Hikari shot back snidely. Now Hikari-chan, that's not fair. Our little ghosty-kun is in a league all his own." Akeno offered with a grin, the thunder she had arching around her before gone, and her demeanor returning to her always smiling self once more. "She does have a point, Hikari-chan. I've never even heard of powers like your brother's before," Rias said, her aura gone and a thoughtful look on her face. "The closest I can think of is the power of worthlessness of the Belial clan, but that simply nullifies the abilities of people and objects, where Naruto's flames consume everything and leave nothing behind, it even feeds off other fires." Everyone stopped to watch as a streak of black energy cut through the sky, allowing them all to know that even as they spoke, Naruto was still fighting with the large wolf. "Oh no, shouldn't we be going to help Naruto-san?" Asia asked shyly, worried about the man that had taken away the loneliness in her heart and even risked his life to save her. Not serious, Kaneko said simply, watching the sky as red and black light flashed quickly. True, Yuto said with a nod. If Ghost was really trying, that feeling of emptiness wouldn't have stopped. Plus, we would have felt him. The blonde swordsman had to stop as a feeling of weightlessness came over him. A glance at Kaneko showed her eyes widen marginally as she felt the same. Release the gravity seals. The boy finished in his mind as he stared at where the light came from. Tatauji's head was whipping from person to person as he tried his best to follow the conversation. Whoever that boy was, he was important to the group, but they also seemed to have complete faith in him as soon as they knew he was alive. He wasn't sure if the boy was going to live, but as long as the group wasn't going to take their worry out on him, he was fine with it. Looking up, he spotted something that would farther get him away from the blame. Oh, look at that. It's a sprite dragon, they are super rare. Naruto ducked as a wolf made of pure shadow leapt over him, only for it to shred into black wisps as the blonde turned his forward momentum into a spin and lash out with a slash to the phantom beast's stomach. Jumping after his slash, the boy did an acrobatic twist and landed a double flip kick to another of the phantom wolves before landing sideways on a tree. Rapidly scanning the area, Naruto spotted his target and sent 3 more shuriken at the tree-bound wolf that was summoning the phantom menaces. The elemental canine snarled and leapt from his perch to the ground. As soon as its paws touched the shadow, spikes shot out at the blonde dragonkin, causing him to leap away from his wooden landing pad and sail up towards where the wolf had just vacated. Wish I had remembered to bring those exploding tags I finally figured out how to make. The boy mutters as he sent a chakra-charged kunai at the already running wolf. The wolf retaliated by shooting out thousands of little blades of darkness towards the blonde, forcing the boy to slip 2 kunai into his hands and use them to fend off as much of the attack as he could. As fast and as skilled as Naruto was, he didn't make through the attack unscathed. His shirt, jacket and pants were littered with tiny cuts and small speckles of blood. Fine, let's play hardball then. Naruto growled before he raised the forefinger and middle finger of both hands and crossed them into a plus sign shape. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called out, causing a large cloud of smoke to form. From the smoke, 20 replicas of blonde jump out into different directions before bouncing back towards the wolf with kunai in hand. Himat watched, very impressed from her place near the top of the trees. She'd never seen a skill like this before, and the boy used the ability excellently. All 21 of the blondes would attack in waves of 7 each, coming in with fists, feet or kunai. As the beast moved to counter the blondes, another wave would sweep in from a different angle to take their chance to attack. When the wolf managed to catch a piece of one of the boys and make it explode in smoke, the others would work to cover the gap in their defense. The battle came to an end when the wolf snapped its jaws closed around the left forearm on one of the remaining 6 blondes. However, unlike the rest, this one didn't explode into smoke, rather the arm released a spray of blood and a yell of pain and rage escaped the boy's mouth. The wolf sunk its teeth in deeper as it thought it had finally had the upper hand on its prey. Its momentary victory didn't last though. With its head locked in one position, all 6 blondes released chakra-empowered attacks to the beast's head, effectively knocking it unconscious. Holding the bite mark on his arm, which was already starting to heal, Naruto stepped away from the prone form of his latest opponent. That had been a long and unexpectedly difficult fight. Although, it would likely have been made much easier if he had use of his void flame, it did remind him not to become dependent on any one ability. Had he not kept up his training to relearn his ninja skills, he could very well have lost. Dispelling his clones, Naruto took a deep breath through his nose, only to wince and fall back into a stance again and start scanning the trees in the area. I know you're there, come out. The boy called out, praying he wouldn't have to deal with another fight so soon. Himat almost snorted at finally being noticed by the blonde hatchling before jumping down to ground level, allowing her body to return to its full 180-foot-long size. She withheld a grin as the boy gulped but didn't back down or bow to her as he looked on her full form. Hello hatchling, what are you doing in my forest? The blue western dragon asked as she stared down at him. Besides getting attacked by big cocky, winged dogs. Naruto asked sarcastically, sending a dirty look at the knocked out wolf and getting a light giggle from the female dragon. My friends came here to hunt familiars and had me come along, that is until stupid here attack me for no reason. Himat lowered herself down to lazy lying position while keeping one eye focused on him, unknowingly causing the boy a savoir cast of deja vu. Really, you are traveling with that group of devils and they haven't added you to their peerage yet? Not for lack of trying. Naruto admitted with a grin as he relaxed slightly. With the dragon lying down showing no hostility, he allowed his chakra aura to vanish. I'm unique in that they weren't able to turn me into a devil with their evil P system. Oh really? Tiamat asked. Yep. Naruto responded with a smirk. Name's Uzumaki Naruto, it's a pleasure to meet you. I am Tiamat the Chaos Karma Dragon, it is a pleasure to meet you as well. The blue dragon said with a nod, neither bowing to each other but acknowledging each other with respect. How did you get the title of Chaos Karma Dragon, Tiamat-san? Naruto asked, knowing that titles like that were earned. Tiamat smiled slightly sadly when she remembered back a very long time ago. It was what my first opponent called me in our last match, since then I always introduced myself as it when I would fight. She explained, causing Naruto to remember how when he fought Mistima, the Fallen had titled him as well. Noticing the look in his eyes, Tiamat smirked. I see you understand our dragon's pride. Now introduce yourself correctly. Naruto looked sharply up at the female dragon king and felt himself answer unwittingly. Maelstrom, the Oblivion Dragon. Rias smiled happily as Asia and Hikari played with their new familiars, along with the rest of her peerage. She'd been shocked when Asia had managed to bond herself with a young Sprit dragon which she named Rito, which she named after the other dragon in their group. The Sprit was cute, however it shocked Yuto the second the boy came to close. Apparently Sprit dragons have an instinctual hate for any other males of other species, which caused some worry for how Naruto and him would get along. Hikari's new pet was another matter of worry. Somehow the Lamia wandered off for a few minutes and came back with a baby Nundu following her around. The snake girl thought it was the cutest thing she'd ever saw and instantly bonded it as her familiar and had been trying to cuddle it to death ever since. While the kitten itself seemed content with Hikari, it hissed and backed away from everyone else except Asia. However, the Sprit dragon and Nundu would end up in staring contests every time they were inside of each other. The part that worried the whole group the most though was it had already been 3 hours and there still had been no sign of Naruto. With a weak signal from his evil pieces, Rias couldn't track him or call to him, she only knew that he was alive, even that being in the most basic of terms. Well, she wasn't worried originally after the pulse of his flames, as she seemed to think it was his way of letting them know he was alright. Now Rias was starting to regret not at least sending Yuto or Kaneko out to find him. Finally tired of waiting for the boy's return, the red-haired beauty stood up and called Akeno over to her. I'm worried. It's been too long and we haven't heard or even felt anything from him. Rias said, knowing that Akeno would already know who she was talking about. But do we even know where to start looking for Ghosty-kun? I can't even feel his energies anymore, not even that really dense chakra from when he started fighting the monarch. Akeno asked, she was all for heading out to hunt their elusive rook, but she was hoping they had some sort of plan. The energy pulse he gave off earlier came from north of us. Rias said while she waved in the general direction that she remembered feeling Naruto using his flames. I think our best chances would be to start heading that W. Rias was prevented from saying anything else when a large black and red form came rolling into the clearing with a loud whine and yelps as it hit the ground. Oh, be quiet, you big wimp. Everyone's head turned as they heard the easily recognizable voice of their missing friend call from where the beaten shadow wolf had been thrown. Welcome back, Nai-san. How was playing with your new friend? Naruto was already giving Hikari a deadpan stare when he stepped out of the wood and into the clearing with the rest of the group. I highly doubt this thing trying to eat me counts as playing Hibi Yamato. Seeing her chipper smile not fading while she awaited her answer, Naruto sighed. However, it was fun and educational. Hikari nodded happily before going back to playing with her Nundu cub. How was your trip? It was great. Asia-chan and I got new friends to play with and everything. This is Kuronami, isn't she cute? Hikari called out happily as she held her Nundu up for Naruto to get a look at. The kitten was about the size of a full-grown house cat but showed its age by the soft and puffy fur it sported. While its fur looked black in color, it in fact was mostly black circles over a dark yellow coat. Yes, very cute indeed. What is she? Naruto asked as he moved towards his sister and friends. She's a Nundu and Asia got a Sprit dragon. The adopted Uzumaki said excitedly until she got a look at Naruto and frowned in worry. His cloths was torn, burnt and covered in blood, while his left sleeve was missing from the elbow down, dried blood was on the side of his face, and his wings were still exposed. Naruto stopped moving forward as he could see both pets quickly hide behind their owners. Looking down, he realized not only was his disheveled appearance, but also he had yet to stop the large amount of chakra he was flowing through his body. Even if it wasn't visible, anything that was in tune with its instincts enough could feel the overwhelming force of power erupting inside of him. He didn't even get a chance to say anything before Asia was upon him, with her scared gear out look to see if she could find where he was hurt. I'm okay, Goldie, they were all just small cuts that have already healed, see? The boy lifted the left side of his shirt and jacket while speaking, exposing his well-defined chest, rippling abs and pristine unmarked skin for all to see. But you were. Naruto released his shirt and lightly ruffled the girl's hair, showing her a calm and gentle smile. Thank you, but I really am okay. Though the dog over there could use some help. The boy explained while thumbing over to where the massive wolf lay still in a crumpled heap. Asia looked over at the wolf with a small frown, upset that it had hurt her blonde savior, before she saw how hurt it was. Her kind nature got the best of her and she walked over to start healing it. So I take it you took so long because you had to carry the wolf with you? Rias asked as she approached the dragonkin. No, I took so long because I kept getting lost in that damned forest. Naruto grumbled. I had no idea where the heck the damn thing dragged me and I kept getting turned around. This caused most of the girls to giggle and Zataoji to sweat drop as he was more annoyed about being lost than being attacked. He chose to keep his meeting with Tiamat to himself for now unless something came up that he needed to tell the others about his meeting a Dragon King. Ria's smile was more relaxed as she felt better with everyone in one group again. The more the group was together the safer and more relaxed she felt, in fact she noticed everyone was more relaxed the more they lived together in Naruto's house. With the exception of Naruto, who was still fairly awkward in larger groups of people, but even he was getting better. Hearing a low growl, Naruto turned to see the wolf was getting back to its feet, pushing Asia away with one of its wings, surprisingly gently. Naruto took a step forward towards the monarch before releasing a growl of his own. The two dominant beings stared fiercely into each other's eyes, growling loudly. Finally the wolf lowered its head and eyes in submission. Naruto nodded before motioning for Asia to finish, being sure to growl at the wolf again when it tried to snarl at the girl. Zataoji stared wide-eyed at this teenage boy that just tamed one of the most dangerous types of wolves ever recorded. 3 incredibly powerful familiars for their first attempts, this is going to be one dangerous group. How did you get him to accept being your familiar? Zataoji asked, already having pulled a pad and paper out to note it down for future note. Again. I just kick its butt because it attacked me. Naruto explained. I'm getting it healed cause it was only attacking me, it ignored everyone else so no reason to go overboard. This remark caused Asia and Hikari to smile lightly that he was being so kind to the wolf while the rest of the Grimoire Peerage frowned at his still lacking self-regard. You are an odd devil, most would have killed it for attacking them. I'm a dragon not a devil. Naruto stated flatly, not even bothering to look back at the man. Everyone's attention was then drawn back to the large wolf as it moved forward and lowered its head towards Naruto, pawing at his foot lightly. What do you want? If you try fighting me again I'm going to beat you with a car. The wolf lay down and covered his nose with his paws, whining lowly. Naruto snorted at the surprisingly intelligent wolf as it completely understood him. Okay, so no attacking. What do you want? The monarch shadow wolf got back to his feet before using one of its wings to point at the familiar master and half barked half howled at them. Naruto raised an eyebrow, following the wing then back to the animal. You want to be my familiar? Nods let me guess. Pack mentality to follow the strongest. Again the wolf nodded at the blonde boy. This caused Rias to become even more excited, her peerage was filling with stronger and stronger beings. If this kept up she would take care of Riser without a worry. Naruto stared hard at the wolf and sighed. Fine, but I swear if you attack anyone in our group, I'm going to beat you with a car so bad you won't know the difference between yourself and a T-bar. Everyone in the clearing other than the wolf and Naruto, sweat dropped from the boy's odd threat but quickly set up casting the bonding spell. Welcome to the family Tabor. Tabor? Yudo questioned the wolf's odd name. Reminder of what happens if he forgets our deal. I'll use him to replace a T-bar in a car. The blonde smirk, clearing making another of his bad jokes. Aka. Kaneko said before she and Asia started to drag the boy towards the exit, all the familiars following their masters. The now named Tabor following a few steps behind sulking at his less than stellar name. Naruto released a loud groan as the sun pierced his eyelids, he did not want to wake up yet. Even if he could stay awake for 4 days at a time, that didn't mean he didn't like his sleep, even if it was on the couch in his study. Despite wanting to go back to sleep, Naruto rolled himself up to a seated position, his bare feet landing on the cool wooden floor, giving him a slight shock from the temperature difference. Ruffling his hair with one hand, the blonde stood up, letting the throw blanket fall from his body back to the couch, leaving him standing only in a pair of dark gray and red sweatpants. Staggering around for a few moments in his sleep-induced haze, Naruto finally managed to make it out of the study and made his way to the kitchen. Coffee was his top priority. Then he'd try to figure out what day it was. Last time he'd stayed up for 3 days and then let himself sleep, he'd been out cold for 20-some hours. It wouldn't do for him to have been asleep for more than a day and not know it. He made it to the kitchen, only for his body to be enveloped in smoke the second he opened the door. Fighting down the coughing fit that came from the acrid smoke, Naruto moved through the room and forced open the windows before heading to where he knew the sink and spray head was to hose down the stove. He didn't need to be fully awake to know this was his sister's fault, so if she was in the way of the water, it wasn't his problem. The loud squawk of surprise, one loud enough to wake the rest of the household, let him know that she was indeed in between the water and whatever that was burning. Naruto, who couldn't find the brain power to open his eyes more than halfway, only grunted at the girl's cries of dismay at getting soaked. Her attempt at cooking was again unsalvageable. "Nai-san, you scared me," Hikari said as she wiped the water off her face and moved to make his coffee. "Everyone was up late worried because you slept so long so I thought I'd surprise them with making breakfast." By now the air in the room was starting to clear, showing a clearly burnt black pan and what might have been eggs and bacon. Hikari herself was also now visible, wearing a soft green sundress that seemed to mix well against her purple hair and scaled tail. She was also clearly pouting that her attempts at cooking only seemed to get worse the more she tried. The door to the room crashed open as everyone from the orc rushed into the kitchen, worried from the scream they had heard. The sight they came upon was not what they had expected. Though they really should have, Naruto had barely reacted as he seemed to start falling asleep again while standing half naked, spraying the sink, while Hikari had managed to jump completely onto the counter between the electric kettle and the stove. "Are you okay, Hikari-chan?" Asia asked. The blush on the nun's face was very apparent from the look of Naruto's upper body on clear display as he finally stopped flooding the destroyed breakfast attempt. A blush that was shared among all the girls besides the boy's sister figure, however her concern for her friend overcoming her desire to stare at her Savory's body. "Yeah, I'm okay, Asia-chan, Nai-san just surprised me." Hikari answered while she reached down and picked up her Nundu kitten and cuddled it to her chest. "Nai-san is such a meanie in the morning, right Kuro-chan?" The cub glared and hissed at Naruto until a deep growl started emanating from the boy's shadow. Haber slowly lifted from the ground behind his master, growling loudly at the Nundu, who responded by turning its glare and hiss toward the large wolf. Everyone in the room could feel the tension starting to rise as the wolf and panther stared off between their masters until the silence was cut off by Naruto in the least expected way. Z. Everyone facephalted as the blonde dragonkin let off a loud snort, having fallen back to sleep because of the quiet tension. "Nai-chan." Hikari's cried out as she heard him. Let it be known that Naruto was never good at reading the mood. It was close to 2 hours later before the group sat down to breakfast. Yudo and Akeno had dragged Naruto off and tossed him into the prepared furo, the water waking him enough to get up and correctly bathe before he returned to the kitchen. Asia and Akeno had been cooking, and Kaneko cleaned up and aired out the kitchen so that it could be used, while Rias had left to get everything ready for the day. As everyone sat around the table eating, Hikari silently moping, depressed by another culinary failure, Akeno stopped eating long enough to pour Naruto another cup of coffee and send a pointed look towards her club president. Feeling the look being sent her way, Rias also set down her chopsticks and took a moment to steady herself. She was not ready for this by any means, but she also knew if she put this off now, she'd never do it until it was too late. "I need to talk to everyone about something important," the girl finally said. "That explains the espresso," Naruto muttered to himself while everyone turned their attention to the red-haired king. He had to ignore the kick he received under the table from Kaneko as he tried to both pay attention and not spill his coffee on his lap. "What's up, Red?" Rias favored the boy a small smile as his quips did in fact ease her nerves a bit. "I need you all to know that, well, I didn't want to tell you all this. It was because you all not knowing helped me forget about it for a while, it was not because I didn't trust you." While Akeno and Kaneko lowered their heads, showing that they were aware of what was coming, the rest of the table, other than Naruto, gave the girl confused looks. Naruto himself just kept sipping his extraordinarily strong coffee while he had his eyes locked with the girl. Seeing that most of the group was giving her their full attention, Rias continued. "Several years before I was born, my parents set up a marriage contract between House Gremory and House Phoenix. It was after the Devil Civil War, so the number of pure-blood devils were low, while the number of reincarnated devils were rising rapidly. Many pure-blooded devils were worried that their family lines would lose their standing as they died out and their ways would be forgotten. I wasn't told until much later when House Phoenix came to enact the contract between their youngest son and me." Everyone could see a look of pure loathing cross the teen's face as she spoke of her fiancé. "By that look, I'm guessing this guy is a really charmer," Naruto remarked dryly, his cynicism clear in his voice. "I like him as much as you like Hyodo, Naru-kun. I'm still not used to you calling me that. To give you an idea of how bad this engagement is, Ghosty-kun, I like this man as much as you like Hyodo," Akeno said, causing everyone to blink. So far the only people Akeno actively disliked were fallen angels. She seemed to be able to tolerate anything else, even Issei's pure creepy level of perversion. For this girl to dislike this guy was very surprising. "Creep," Kaneko added in just adding to the case. "Okay, so the guy's a grade A dirtbag. Why are you telling us?" Naruto decided he'd have to meet this guy before he made a final judgment, but as he was making his family upset, he wasn't likely to be getting along with him. Rias sighed as she rested her arms on the table and cradled her chin in her hands, her eyes losing focus as she remembered something. "I've spent the last 10 years trying to get myself out of this engagement. It was set up so that if both parties agree, we could end it cleanly, but no matter how much I try, Riser, my fiancé, refuses to let it end. He doesn't take any bets, won't listen to reason hell, he even is refusing anything I try to bribe him with." Rias had to momentarily shudder as she remembered the look in his eyes for both her and her female peerage members. Shaking off the memory, she missed the cold look that flashed through Naruto's eyes. I've been looking over every record I could get my hands on to try to find a way out. The best options I've found were to challenge him to a rating game or soil myself before the wedding," she said while looking down, clearly upset. "Oh no, what's a rating game?" Asia asked, unaware of the term. A rating game is a match where two kings challenge each other's peerages to battle. The matches take place in an arena that is monitored so the battle can be recorded, and the peerage members can be pulled out if they lose the fight, so there are no fatalities. Rating games came into play shortly after the Evil P system was created, as many high-class devils often bragged about their peerages compared to others, often leading to duels. Now they are used for many reasons, and often seen as a status symbol or a way to settle disputes. The Kendo explained for her friend, who seemed to have locked eyes with the silent blonde boy at the end of the table, unable to look away from him. "Does soil yourself mean what I think it does?" Naruto asked in a dead calm voice. Rias held his eyes with a sad look. "To give away my virginity, yes. Answer me this, honestly. Were you planning on getting me to do it?" "Originally, yes." Her voice quiet, eyes downcast while she responded to his question. "What changed your mind?" Naruto's voice was still calm and cold. Rias took a deep breath to settle her nerves again, she knew she had to tell him straight on, or he may not believe her. "I didn't want to hurt what little trust you have in me," she said while looking him straight in the eye. "Although I trust you and like you enough that I wouldn't mind the act, I wouldn't feel right having used you for such a thing, and I know you would be hurt by the thought of me using you like that. Even if I still think that is my best bet to get out of this marriage." Her voice was firm and eye unwavering. Naruto kept his eyes locked with her for a few moments before a small smile made its way to his lips, there wasn't a hint of deceit in her words. Nodding his acceptance for her answer, Rias released a sigh. Well, it was a bit of a gamble admitting that to him, it would have been much worse had she lied and he found out. So what makes the rating game such a bad option? Riser is a mature devil and has been for a few years now, so he already has a full peerage and has participated in many rating games. Rias said as she pulled some files from her carry bag that she had with her. Passing the information to the blonde, she continued. "As I'm not a mature devil, I can't enter any official rating games, so we don't have a lot of combat experience, nor do I have a full peerage. Although it's much more full now than it was last year at this time. I also don't really have any idea what our full combat power is, so I can't even plan accordingly." Setting his coffee off to the side, Naruto started shifting through the records and pictures from Riser's past rating games. "This is why you were so motivated to gather peerage members, I take it?" Naruto asked, basically ignoring her unasked question at the moment. Rias nodded, a little let down that the boy still wasn't forthcoming with any information about himself. Naruto's eyes sharply moved across the pages of stats about each of Riser's peerage. The most notable members besides Riser himself were his queen and the notably non-combative bishop. "Fine, ask." The blonde finally said, his eyes not leaving the pages while he contemplated how to fight this group. Ria's eyes flew open in shock before she smiled, grabbing Hikari's hand unconscionably in her excitement. "How strong are you really?" "No clue, don't really have a measuring stick, but I would have lost to Mistima had he not been playing with us," Naruto said honestly. He knew he got lucky with that fight, even if it seemed to have messed up his flames after whatever happened. "Are you a ninja?" Yudo asked, having wanted to know this since he'd met the slippery blonde bastard he called his best friend. "Yes." Naruto said simply, causing a defining silence to fall over the household. Everyone was too shocked to say anything by his announcement, leaving the boy to enjoy his coffee as he considered how to deal with this new threat to his family's happy life. "You do know that just silently staring is creepy, right?" The two-tone-haired man said as he shifted slightly under the slitted gaze of the boy in front of him. He may be old and more powerful than him, but the boy always had this look like you were never in control, and it was better to let this dangerous wild animal have what it wanted. The boy's now slitted pupils only added to the effect, making the staring contest they had been having a very uneven match. "Fine. What do you want to know?" "See, that wasn't so hard," Naruto said as a smirk made its way to his face. Azazel just grumbled about cocky, know-it-all brats while he waited for Naruto to ask his questions. They had met up at a cafe in Tokyo proper after Rias dropped her little bomb on them this morning. As it was Sunday, they didn't have school, and Azazel had finished most of his meetings in the area for the week, now was the best time for them to meet. "How did no one there notice you were a fallen angel?" They all had various ways of sensing energy, and Kitten's got a wicked nose on her. "I was sure they'd have caught you." Azazel's face changed from one of resignation to one of glowing pride in heartbeats when he heard the question. Reaching a hand into his business suit, he pulled out a fist-sized semicircle-like object that had a ribbed lip around the lower half of it. The object seemed to be made of black crystal, while the lip had a dull look of hard plastic or non-processed metal. "That was because of this. It's a type of artificial sacred gear I made based on the idea of your own hiding abilities. It's a prototype with more than a few issues so far. I never really got to study your abilities very thoroughly, but it allows for the user to cast a glimmer over themselves that completely hides their energy signature. Downfall is that while the glimmer is in place, the person can't use any energies or spells without the glimmer falling. It consumes a lot of magic to hold the disguise and can only be held for a week maximum. Azazel explained, becoming frustrated at the shortcomings of his device. Your house was the first real field test of it. While the energy drain would be less if it was truly implanted, I needed to test the length and limits of it. I see. That would make for a very useful spying tool. Naruto said as he looked over the device. Not really. Well, not yet anyway. The man said as he leaned back in his chair a little. It makes the user appear to be pure human for now, as it can't fake the energy signal of a devil or angel. So it's not useful for spying on most beings. Well, it would work on humans, most humans can't sense our energies anyway, so it's a bit of a waste of time right now. Seemed pretty useful while you were staying with me. Naruto countered while he sat back sipping his coffee. Their friends already thought I was human so they didn't look into it too much. Azazel countered the boy. Your ability, which is what I was trying to reproduce, makes you invisible to any form of senses. Unless someone is looking right at you, it's like you're not even there. Well, until you started producing those void flames of yours. Naruto raised an eyebrow when Azazel explained this. So you're saying that I'm pretty much the ultimate spy and you want to make more of me? Isn't that pretty counterproductive for you? If more beings like me were out there they could spy on you too. Well yes, but at the same time it would give us the ability to blend in better. As the church is still hunting any of us it can find, even the ones that simply want to live a normal peaceful life, this would be a perfect way to prevent them from being followed. Azazel explained. And the perfect way to sneak into an enemy camp and kill them all without being found out. Perv, you may have the best intentions, but there are so many ways that can be turned against you. Just look what happened with the atom bomb humans built. The original idea was to make cheaper, safer power plants. Instead, it was weaponized. Naruto argued. Though his voice was calm, his face was dead serious. Seeing the other man about to defend his faction, Naruto pushed through. You already said yourself that there were rogues in your group. What do you think would happen if they got their hands on this sort of ability? Azazel winced at that thought. He had thought this sort of thing would be great to escape hunters or when he wanted to go fishing so others couldn't find him and bring him back. Just imagining the amount of damage a battle maniac like Akabiel could do if no one could track him was frightening to the peace-loving pervert. I hadn't thought of that. He finally admitted as he sunk into his seat. I'm not faulting your motives Uncle Oz, just your forethought. The ability to completely disappear may not seem like a very destructive thing at first glance, but in the wrong hands could cause another war as easily as it could end one. Damn, now I know I'm losing my touch. I'm being lectured by a teenager, and he's right. Azazel moaned half-jokingly. Haven't you heard? Teenagers know everything. Naruto shot back with a cocky smirk. Watch it brat, I still pay your allowance. Speaking of, think I could get an advance on that. Food money is running kind of tight. Naruto asked, holding in a chuckle when Azazel dropped his face to the table. Why did I adopt you again? Because you'd be bored otherwise. Damn brat. Azazel muttered. The two other worldly beings sat there for a while longer, allowing their conversation to travel across many other topics, from their different jobs to day-to-day life. Azazel finally was able to explain what he did in far more detail than their original conversation, which was more focused on Azazel trying to explain why he hid what he did from the blonde boy. Hineko fell to her knees, panting as sweat dripped from the side of her face onto her hand. Her shirt, the same one she had taken to wear during the dodgeball match, was soaked and torn in many places, just barely maintaining her modesty. Yudo was a few feet behind her, equally as beaten but passed out, leaning against one of the many trees in the area. The opponents, the two had been facing stood before her, tired and sweating lightly but still able to continue. I do believe that we are finished for tonight. Hineko tried to stand and protest, only to fall again. Don't wanna. Naruto sighed before motioning his shadow clone to go collect Yudo, while he himself moved to pick up Kaneko. Kitten, any more and you'll do more harm to yourself than good. Yudo knocked himself out an hour ago, but you kept pushing. I'm proud of how far you've come, already able to train at level 5 gravity, but if you don't slow down and rest you'll just end up hurting yourself. Need to be stronger. The girl muttered as she was lifted onto the blonde ninja's back. Like you. Kitten, I'm the exception, not the rule. Like I told everyone this morning. I was a ninja last time around, a trained fighter, now I'm a dragon, I don't follow the rules of normal, and likely never will. Naruto said with a chuckle. However, you're learning very quickly, you're already starting to move in step with my attacks. Still can't hit you. The white-haired catgirl said tiredly, already starting to fall asleep while being carried through the forest they'd been training in. Naruto had just returned from his meeting with Azazel when both Yudo and Kaneko had appeared before him, requesting he step up their training. The Keno had even insisted that she be allowed to cook so he could help the two, as she and Rias trained Asia and Hikari in magic. While slightly surprised at them all seeming to be so fired up about the training, he wasn't about to turn them down. Even he knew he needed more training after the incident with Tabor. Losing use of his flames greatly bothered him. They had been the deciding factor when he was fighting the fallen angels at the church to save Asia. Their release had been what saved Akeno and Rias from the death worm after he died, but now just calling them out caused him to cough up blood and lose control of them. He'd spent weeks just getting enough control to make them come out without them trying to consume everything around him. Now he had to start all over. Only this time they may even try to consume him as well. With Ria's future on the line, he couldn't afford to play with a handicap like that. He'd had to have a couple of his shadow clones train with the two for several hours while he tried to regain any form of control over the flames. It had taken him 2 hours and more pain than he'd care to admit, but he had managed to summon and dispel a small amount of flame without losing control. However, he'd been coughing up blood for 20 minutes afterward. Once his chakra healed whatever was damaged, he gave up for the night and returned to training with his friends. While the two seemed to want to know what he was doing, they didn't push for answers as he replaced one of his clones in their sparring sessions. Naruto didn't even make it to the backyard of his property when he started to hear light snoring in his ear. Taking a quick glance back over his shoulder, the boy started to chuckle lightly. Kaneko, despite her insistence to continue training, was already asleep just from the walk back to the house, her small hand clenched tightly to his shirt. Looking over to his clone, he saw that Yudo was still passed out even as he was in a fireman's carry over the clone's shoulder. Said clone was chuckling while shaking his head. Well, they have spunk, if nothing else. His copy said quietly to prevent waking either of them. That they do, but I'm starting to wonder about Yudo. He was a light sleeper in chemistry, but now he seems to always be in a near coma. That can't be healthy. The original replied. He's bringing it on himself, even when we tell him to take a break he just starts doing something else. Wonder if we can make some sort of equivalent to Solider pills with alchemy. Naruto said as they finally reached the house. I don't think I'll ever get used to that. Called a new voice from the back door. Looking up, the two Narutos saw Rias standing in the doorway. She was leaning her left shoulder on the frame of the door while watching the approaching group. They okay? You've been gone for quite a while. They're fine, nothing a few hours of rest and a big meal won't fix. The Naruto holding Yudo said to the girl. Any dinner left, Red? I'm starving. I'm pretty sure the smell will wake these two up as well. The original announced. Rias smiled lightly and nodded while she moved out of the doorway to let the weary group enter. Yes, Akeno made sure to put aside a good amount for you three. Asia and Hikari also prepared the furo for you. We figured you would want to clean up after training. Thanks, we'll need it. Prep's been napping in the dirt for an hour and Kitten didn't want to stop until she almost drowned in her own sweat. Naruto said with a chuckle while he and his clone laid both down in the dining room. Sending his clone to get a couple of towels for the two, the blonde boy made his way to the kitchen to reheat some food with Rias following him. So what's on your mind, Red? I know it was more than this rating game that's got you thinking. Rias stopped as the two entered the kitchen. She started nibbling on her lower lip while she tried to come up with a way to ask her question. What do you think of me? Naruto looked back at her oddly while he stopped portioning out the food. How do you mean? Rias sighed as she moved to lean against the wall next to the door. Well, I know we didn't really get off to the best start with you being mad at me for how I revived you the only way I could. Then the trust issues, arguments and everything else, but you got along with everyone else so much better than me. You never told me anything about yourself, but from what I saw when you were explaining stuff this morning, Kaneko and Hikari already knew about it. So I just want to know what you really think of me. Naruto sighed as he set down the plates he'd dished out. I'll be blunt, Red. When we first met, I thought you were a spoiled rich kid that got by on her good looks and had everything handed to her. Your introduction to devil lifestyle didn't help matters, by the way. It basically sounded like, hey. You died for me, so now you're my slave. Not the best way to say this stuff, Red, you really need to work on that. Rias winced at that as she remembered how badly that whole conversation went. Naruto shook his head while chuckling, putting the first plate into the microwave before he continued. But, I'll admit I wasn't completely right about you. Yes, you were a bit spoiled and you could get everything handed to you because of your good looks, but you don't want that. You work hard to get people to see you as yourself. You're very caring about those close to you and aren't afraid to get dirty when it comes down to it. I can respect that. You are also getting better with this whole servant master outlook, which, well, okay in the bedroom, I'm really not a fan of otherwise. Rias blushed a bit at the comment about bedroom games, something she would have expected from Akeno, not the blonde dragonkin in front of her. So I'm kind of your friend? Rias asked, a bit unsure of what he was saying. Nope. Naruto said simply, switching the plates that he was heating up. Ria's whole demeanor dropped when he said that, sadness clearly building in her eyes before Naruto finished his statement. Your family. Waria's head shot up in shock, earlier depression gone. What, you don't think I'd have gone out of my way to get this house for all of us if I didn't consider you close enough to think you part of my life, did you? Naruto said with a grin. As I've told Kaneko before, I may not know love or really any true emotion, but I am empathic to a degree. I know you care about us all and worry about us. At first I thought it was a possessive worry like that of an item. However, the longer I was around, the more I saw that it was a genuine caring that you had. Admittedly odd ways of showing it, but you truly care for all of us as family, as far as I can tell. If you think of us as such, then I can do the same, at least. Ria smiled tenderly with a blush of real happiness on her cheeks before she walked up and hugged him. You know, for someone who says he can't feel emotions, you really have a way of drawing them out of others. Really? Naruto asked while he awkwardly patted Ria's back. Cause I have no idea what I said to make you want to hug me. Just shut up and hug me back. Ria said with a small giggle. Sona and Rias walked side by side towards the club room. Sona couldn't hold back the twitch in her eyebrow as she knew where this coming meeting would lead. She had seen the other two of the perverted trio, both were covered in pink feathers that wouldn't come off, so she knew the last was likely the same. Since the boy knew the person who likely did the punishment, she assumed he was likely here to find the way to remove them. She had come to collect him and add to his punishment and likely have to ask forgiveness from the blonde dragon. Rias had warned her she would have to be quick as a meeting was going to be happening very soon that would not be pleasant. Grafia was already in the room with Ria's Peerage and Riser would be arriving soon, so she was hoping that she could just get her wayward pawn, apologize and leave. The high-pitched scream coming from the room down the hall ended that thought quickly and only caused the student council president to sigh aloud. I'm starting to believe that Hyodo-sen is more trouble than he is worth. The pink-eyed devil muttered out. I am beginning to think I got off lucky having you end up with him. Rias agreed quietly with her old friend. Shaking her head, they made their way towards the clubroom door. They, however, weren't able to open it before it was smashed into the wall across the hall, propelled by a pink and blue rocket. Blinking a few times to clear the surprise from almost being hit by the door to the room, both girls looked to where the door landed and saw it was Sona's pawn. He was frozen upside down to the door while still being completely covered in pink feathers. Looking in the direction he came from, they saw Grafia standing behind one of the couches with her arm extended towards the frozen boy, her eyebrow twitching dangerously. The difference between perverted and annoying is I get hit less violently, moron. Naruto's voice called out from the clubroom. Hi. Issei managed to groan out before passing out. I apologize Oju-sama. Grafia said as she bowed low to the young red-haired girl in the doorway. I'm afraid my temper got the better of me when he tried to touch me. Rias sighed and was about to reply when Naruto decided he should cut into the conversation before the maid decided to take the blame and likely get herself in trouble. Hey Red, don't listen to Maid-chan, I was riling everyone up before Perv came busting in, got a little too full of himself and tried to get a handful for himself. Naru-kun, when aren't you riling people up? Rias asked, a smirk on her face. Something that she very much enjoyed about Naruto was his way of lightening the atmosphere. The boy was sitting on the couch across the room from her brother's queen, Kaneko once more seated on the boy's lap. Yudo was sitting next to the pair, enjoying a cup of tea that Akeno was serving to everyone. Is that a trick question? Wah. Naruto turned to mock glare at Kaneko, who had started poking his ribs. Baka. Asia, who was standing behind Naruto, giggled lightly at the white-haired girl's comment. If Yufu, Ghosty-kun you really should behave yourself with Kaneko-chan so near. Akeno said even as she was having trouble trying to control her laughter. Oh Citri-sama, what can we do for you? I'm only here to collect my wayward pawn, again, and express my apologizes to your group Akeno-sama. Sona said as she bowed to the group. As her head was down, she missed Grafia's wide-eyed look as the heir to the Citri house, referring to a servant as Sama. I also express my deep apologizes to you Lucifuge-sama for Hyodo-sen's actions against you. No Citri-sama, it is I who must apologizes for my actions against your pawn. It was not my place to discipline him. Also, please do not refer to one such as me so highly, it is unbecoming of the heir to House Citri. Turning her bow towards Sona as she did so. Sona quickly turned her eyes towards Naruto, only to see the boy shake his head slightly. Grimacing slightly, Sona swallowed her pride and spoke. I'm afraid, due to extenuating circumstances, I cannot do that Lucifuge-sama. As it is a matter of family honor, I cannot explain further, but for the time being I must continue this course. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he expected her to say it was his fault rather than defy the powerful maid. The group's conversation was once again interrupted, only this time by a flaming teleportation circle, which marked the entrance of a blonde man. The man was dressed in a well-tailored black suit coat and pants, along with shining black dress shoes. The high-collared white button-down shirt he wore under the coat was left open down to his stomach exposing his chest, while black undershirt could just be seen under it. "Ah my lovely, I've come to see you." "Wow, this guy's got the douchebag flashy entrance down to a T." Naruto whispered over to Yuto, who was seated next to him and Kaneko. "Flashy fried chicken." Kaneko muttered, her eyes narrowed and glaring at the man as he approached Rias. "Now, I know it's sudden Rias, but let's go and look over the ceremony site, the date has already been set." The man said as he gave a close-eyed smile and wrapped an arm around her. "Let go of me, Riser." Rias growled out loudly while throwing him off of her, causing Naruto to gain a glare to match Kaneko's. Seeing the man reaching for Rias again, his eyes still closed, Naruto decided to act. "Ah, Rias, you're acting so embarrassed." Riser said, his hand finding its place on a shoulder, a surprisingly hard one. "I think it's you that needs to be embarrassed, as well as getting your eyes checked. I'm a blonde, not a redhead." An annoyed male voice said while brushing the hand off. Riser quickly opened his eyes in shock, which turned to anger. "Who are you?" The youngest Phoenix son demanded. "The guy you just tried to cop a feel off of." "Sorry idiot, but I'm straight." Naruto shot back coldly, his newfound temper barely in check. Flames started flickering around Riser's body as his own anger started to show from being mocked by who he thought was a lowly servant. "You dare mock me? Do you know who I am? Do you really think I care?" Naruto countered, his eyebrow rising mockingly. "All I need to know is that you're not wanted and not taking the hint. I am the third son of the noble house of Phoenix, a pure-blood high-class devil." Riser started to yell as Naruto simply turned his back on the yelling devil and approached where Rias was now sitting with Kaneko on her lap. Both were very confused. "Are you listening? I already told you I don't care who you are, you charbroiled peacock," Naruto said, waving the other man off. This only served to piss the arrogant man off more. Losing sight of his surroundings, Riser screamed and launched a large fireball toward the waving blonde. Feeling the heat of the flames, Naruto whipped around. His once waving hand covered in black flames sliced through the ball, causing it to disperse into the air. When the rapidly fading smoke cleared, Riser was treated to a sight that shook him. Naruto's eyes had shifted from icy blue to glowing garnet that radiated primal power, his teeth had also sharpened and lengthened. Growling loudly, his anger starting to get the better of him, Naruto was about to launch towards the flame-covered man, intent on ripping Riser to pieces, as he had almost hurt his family. He didn't get a chance, as both his arms were caught by the two girls he'd just defended, while Riser was restrained by a glowing graphia. Ice was covering the ground around the women and slowly starting to form on Riser's suit jacket. "You will stop now or, for the honor of my master Lucifer-sama, I will not hold back," the silver-haired maid said, staring directly into the young Phoenix's eyes. "Naruto-kun, please calm down." Rias pleaded as she and Kaneko were starting to move towards Riser and Graphia, even while pulling back as hard as they could. The rest of the peerage had to join the two girls to hold the whiskered boy from making it to his target. The boy suddenly stopped his advance, his eyes and teeth returning to normal. He snorted and turned his back to his target when he saw Riser cowering from the silver-haired women. Feeling something on his lip, he quickly reached his hand up and wiped away what was sure was blood. As he turned away from everyone trying to hide it, the boy growled under his breath, "Coward. Since this obviously will not be settled peacefully." Graphia started, keeping an eye on Naruto as he retook his seat, Kaneko quickly joining him to keep him calmer. "If you insist on not willingly taking part in this wedding, then how about settling this in a rating game? As you know, Oju-sama is not a mature devil, so she cannot participate in an official match, but if it is an unofficial match, then even non-adult devils can participate," Graphia explained. "Which says that father and the others knew I would refuse and decided to set up a rating game match beforehand. Just how far will they continue to interfere with my life before they are satisfied?" Rias grumbled to herself before turning to Riser. "Fine Riser, I challenge you to a game." "Really now? You know I've been in and won many matches already, even still you still wish to fight me?" Riser asked, his arrogance is returning to his voice. "Yes, I will make you disappear," Rias said strongly, no hint of hesitation. "Very well, but is this your entire peerage?" Riser asked while waving to the group of devils that had taken to standing around Naruto to prevent the boy taking another run at the arrogant devil. "Because this game will be a joke if it is," the man flaunted as he swung his arm out. "Let me show you my cute servants." The second flaming teleportation circle appeared on the far side of the room, releasing a full group of women from it. Naruto raised an eyebrow while he looked over the group of women that the man had summoned. While he could admit some of them felt strong, Naruto was sure that Riser had picked them more for looks rather than tactical value, as each was beautiful in their own right. He started putting names to faces he remembered from the files he'd looked over with Rias. The two strongest were a purple-haired woman in a flowing white cape who stood in front of the rest, Ubaluna. The other was a smaller blonde girl with hair and two drill-shaped ponytails. She seemed to be trying to come off as haunting, but to Naruto she just looked like she was pouting cutely. Rival Phoenix. Directly behind the purple-haired woman stood three slightly weaker girls, in terms of power. They didn't look much weaker in appearance compared to the drill-haired girl, thought their energy level were a good deal smaller. The first was a black-haired girl with a colorful kimono who had a polite smile as she looked around. Mihi. Naruto would have sworn he just met the black-haired version of Asia, with the way the girl's eyes traveled around the room with slight wonder and oddly polite happiness. She was placed between two women who were holding swords in ready but relaxed stances. The woman on Mihi's left was covered in light plate gray armor made for speed, while still offering fair protection. Carloman. She had sandy brown hair tied up by a white bandana and short broadsword. The swordswoman on the right had a white battle dress on with black gauntlets and greaves cirrus. Her hair was long and black, held up in an odd-looking top-bound ponytail that broke into several smaller ponytails that were tied off at their ends in gold bands. Her sword was what really caused Naruto give her his full attention. She was easily holding up a giant's wayhander, as if held no weight to her, intoning that she had a great deal of practice with her choice of weapon and the strength to wield it correctly. Standing at the outer wings of the group were two girls that stood more in defense stances. One of the girls had a mask covering half her face, with orange-tinted brown hair with red streaks in her bangs. Isabella. She wore a tight leather jacket that was cut to expose her stomach and jeans that had the right leg ripped off. Naruto would have guessed she was in a gang before becoming a devil or based her clothes on that assumption. The other girl looked slightly younger than the gangster and looked like a Chinese martial artist, including hair buns and kung fu dress. Shulan. The back line of girls were slightly eclectic. Two young, identical green-haired twins in school gym clothes wielding chainsaws, Isla and Nell, if you remembered correctly. Two mid-teen twin cat girls in skimpy sailor-type school uniforms, one with blue hair, Nai, the other with red, Lee. Next to the cat girls were a couple of girls dressed in full black French-made uniforms, one with brown hair, Marion, the other with almost black, Burant. Following her was a woman dressed like belly dancer. If he recalled right, she was named Sharia. The final girl, Mira, was dressed like a shrine worker with a bow staff that had both ends wrapped with a cloth bundle. All in all, Naruto could say, although attractive, something that could be attested to by the crying he could hear from the still frozen Issei in the hall, he was not overly impressed with their power. If they all were as strong as the purple-haired women or the drill-haired girl, he'd be worried. But as of now, he only saw three of them as a threat. Wasn't he just cowering in fear not 3 seconds ago? Naruto muttered to the group around him. Baka, fried chicken. Kaneko said again. I wonder if I can breathe fire. Naruto randomly muttered. What? Yudo asked. Well, I just thought I could use the time this hot air bag was wasting to contemplate something more intelligent, so I was wondering if I could breathe fire now. Naruto replied, causing Akeno and Rias to start giggling while Asia actually started considering it. Kaneko and Sona, who had decided to stay and watch the meeting, only sighed while Yudo looked worried. Please tell me you're not going to try to perfect doing that on me? Yudo asked in worry. Have to figure out if I can first. Naruto said, waving off the other boys' worry. Most of the women in the room started to giggle at the two boys' banter. Even a couple of the girls in Riser's Peerage had trouble holding back their laughter. Are you quite finished, you low-class trash? Riser demanded again, aggravation clear in his voice. Are you still here? I'm fairly sure no one ordered fried chicken for lunch, so you can go. Naruto's mockingly countered, his posture seemingly relaxed. You dare mock Riser-sama, one of the girls from the man Peerage shouted before she launched herself at the seated whiskered boy. The girl lifted her double-ended staff to try and strike him in the chest, even if Kaneko could have been hit as well. All the girl's speed was stopped instantly as her staff hit Naruto's outstretched hand, which didn't move a bit from the impact. Daring to look up, the staff-wielding girl froze in place as sweat started to form on her brow, glowing slitted red eyes glared down at her from his seat. I dare. Naruto growled back as his energy started to fill the room. All of Riser's Peerage took an involuntary step back. Riser himself was about to make another attempt to attack, hoping to encourage his servants more, but a loud deep growling stopped him and frightened his Peerage even more. From behind Naruto's chair, the large form of Tabor entered the room through a shadow, his wings and fangs on full display. Riser's eyes opened even more in shock as he watched the legendary monarch Shadow Wolf take up a position of guarding the blonde that had mocked and insulted him since he had entered the club room to retake what was his from the human world. Riser couldn't help but snarl as he saw how shaken his Peerage was from the blonde's display. Even his pawn Mira had quickly retreated behind him after the wolf appeared in the room. Rias was having the opposite in lines of thought. The small display Naruto was showing, even if he hadn't called up his black flames, was truly inspiring hope in her. She had no doubts that Akeno and Kaneko were feeling the same, as watching the arrogant man's entire peerage flinch back from a glare and a small flare of power from her friend was truly a sight to behold. HMPH, fine, the match will take place in 15 days' time. You can even pick the battlefield. Come, we're leaving. Rias barked out as he activated his teleportation circle. The ass even barks like a chicken. Naruto snorted out just after the spell started, allowing him to be heard, but too late for Rias to do or say anything back. Reaching down, he started to scratch Tabor's neck while he let everyone laugh to relieve some tension the meeting had caused. So I think we're going to need a place to train, cause the woods behind my place aren't going to be big enough for fast pace, long-term training like we are going to need. Yeah, we're just going up to Red's vacation home for a few weeks. Naruto said into the phone. He was in his study at his place with all the others, they were currently packing their things for the extended training trip, something both Yuto and Kaneko were excited for. Nah, it's already been cleared with the school as a club activity, so I'm good there. It surprised him with how eager they seemed to be to do more of his training. Even when they often passed out right after he finished, and now they were likely to do so before he finished. Ah okay, thanks, I'll need it before we leave. He was currently explaining to Azazel what was happening, even if it was slightly vague. Nai-san, Ria's Ni-chan says they should be ready to go in 5 minutes. Hikari's voice called out through the closed door. Naruto pulled the phone away from his head before he called back. Okay, I'll be done in a minute. Going back to the phone as he turned away from the door. You hear that? Okay, yeah, I'll let you know when I'm back in town, just let me know if you hear any more about the deal with the devil that set Asia up. That was something Naruto had learned during his conversation with Azazel on Sunday. Rainer had made it back to Azazel with Carewarner, who was excused of wrongdoing when she had added a good deal to the black-haired Fallen's report. A devil was apparently the one that had set up Asia's excommunication and then offered her up to the fallen angels for her sacred gear. While they didn't know the devil's name or why he had done it, none had counted on Naruto's interference. Now while Asia was safer due to her being a devil, Azazel and Rainer both warned him that the devil wasn't likely to give up. He'd also been warned that Kakabiel was very upset about Mistima's death and demanding that the Fallen's killer be found. Azazel was blocking all of Kakabiel's attempts to find out who was involved but warned Naruto all the same as the Fallen was already on the verge of being declared rogue. Right, thanks uncle. Naruto said before finally hanging up. Grabbing the storage scroll with all his extra equipment, Naruto started for the door, though he didn't show it as much as the others that he was looking forward to this trip as well. He'd remembered his training for the Rasengan last night, so he now had 3 things he was planning on working on. Azazel had called him to let him know he'd paid of Naruto's credit card, so he now had money for supplies for his training as well. Picking up the full backpack, which he had his clones prepare for him while he spoke to Azazel, the blonde boy walked out to see everyone else was just arriving in the living room. Everyone ready? Getting nods from all, Naruto nodded back and started towards the door. Okay, let's lock up then head to the store, I need some training gear for myself. If anyone else needs anything, get it. We have a lot of stuff at the house Naru-kun, what else could you need? Rias asked, she was fairly sure all the training equipment they would need was already ready at her family vacation home. Naruto only grinned, trust me when I say you won't have it. They'll seem pretty random. Nai-san, everything you do seems random. Hikari deadpanned at him. Naruto turned to defend himself, only to get matching looks from everyone in the group. Even Asia couldn't stop herself from giving him a flat look. Am I really that bad? Who carries around contact cement and dyed pink chicken feathers? Yuto questioned, showing a bit of the random acts Naruto seemed to do. They came in handy, didn't they? You crawled across the teacher's desk to sleep at lunch, Ghosty-kun. I was tired and the other desks weren't big enough to lie down on. You took the coffee maker from the staff room and plugged it in on my desk during chemistry class. Yuto added in again. Hey, that one helped you stay away for an entire class for once. Naruto cut in. It also got me detention. Blah, you were out again in like 10 minutes cause your fangirl scared the teacher. Naruto said, waving off the other blondes near detention as he led them out of the gate of his house. By this point, everyone else was laughing as the 2 blonde boys traded shots with each other. Their interaction a clear indication of how close they had become as friends, to the point that most passerbys would think they had been friends all their lives rather than only a few months. Naruto didn't even stop his back and forth with Yuto when Kaneko slipped forward and took hold of his hand. He did raise an eyebrow when he saw Hikari copy the catgirl's actions with the blonde knight. The fact that said knight copied his actions, holding her hand without turning away from the whiskered boy, just seemed oddly amusing to the ninja. Hikari holding Yuto's hand without protest would be spreading like wildfire by the time they came back from the trip, leaving a lot of girls heartbroken, and with Yuto to have to clear up a lot of rumors. Naruto would have felt sorry for what the boy was doing to himself if it wasn't so funny. From the looks of mischief and amusement in Rias and Akeno's eyes, they were thinking the same thing. Pushing the thoughts aside for now, Naruto led the group into one of the malls in the nearby area to his house. He had a large supply of balloons and rubber balls to buy. Back in the swirling chaotic nexus of color and stone, the short gothic girl with a purple dress and long black hair stood before two kneeling figures. The first was a sharp-faced teen with side-swept silver-gray hair. He was dressed in a black leather jacket and a dark green undershirt. His pants were made of black denim with a chain hanging from his left side. Combat boot finished his outfit off. The teen was tall and thin, giving him a strong yet wiry look, but he didn't look unhealthy or underfed. Next to the silver-haired teen was a young woman with long black hair and voluptuous body. She was dressed in a loose-fitting black and red kimono that was tied closed with a large golden ribbon. The woman looked to be slightly shorter than the teen, but her face showed a matured yet playful woman. The most defining features on the woman were her two large cat-like ears rising out of her hair and the two black tails that peeked out the bottom of her kimono. The young-looking girl let her eyes scan over the two people before her, while her face betrayed nothing of her thoughts or emotions. Volley, Kuroka. I have felt a great release of energy from within Japan. A being with powers not unlike my own has awakened there, find him and bring him to me. Yes, Office-sama. The two said in unison. After a moment of waiting for more details, the silver-haired teen looked up towards the young-looking girl. Office-sama, is there anything else you can tell us about him? Office sat back down in her throne-like chair and closed her eyes for a moment while the two waited patiently. After a few moments, Office opened her eyes once more and looked toward the silver teen. Only that he is a dragon and he was in the area of Kuo 2 weeks ago. He has an ability to completely conceal himself. Volley's eyes narrowed slightly while he's staring downwards in thought, such ability would be both very handy and very irritating. Well, they had an idea where the target was in general, without the ability to sense him in any way it was going to be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Very well, Office-sama, we will leave immediately. Office looked at the two for a moment as they stood up to leave her realm. He is a dragon, so he's not to be underestimated. Bring him to me, it matters not how long is needed. Volley almost sighed in relief when he heard that, he held it in successfully but just barely. As you wish, Office-sama. The teen said as he led Kuroka out of the portal to the powerful being's realm. Once they were outside, Kuroka released her own sigh of relief. While she wasn't as restrained as her silver-haired team leader, she knew she shouldn't act out in front of the girl that was known as the Infinite Dragon God if she wanted to live for long. If she can't even sense this guy, how exactly are we supposed to find him? She asked while stretched out her back by leaning backwards with her arms held out over her head. Volley looked back at the stretching Catwoman for a moment before he turned his eyes forward. When you are looking for a needle in a haystack, you use a magnet. Office-sama said the target is a dragon. Dragons naturally seek out strong opponents. So all we need do is stay in the area while surveying the town and he will appear before us. Kuroka blinked until she remembered his sacred gear had a dragon sealed inside of it too. That makes sense and it's a good thing Office-sama didn't give us a time limit then. But isn't Kuo under devil control? How are all of us going to get in and stay unnoticed? At the end of her question, she tilted her head to the side and blinked cutely at him while having her index finger touching her chin lightly. Volley didn't even look back at her, thereby ruining her attempt to get a rise out of him. He'd become all too used to her flirting by now, so he could ignore it mostly. Although she could still catch him off guard once in a while. She acted like this with almost everyone, so he knew that there was little point in trying to stop her or comment on it. Once there, we will have to suppress our auras until the Fae can set up a barrier around our base of operations. We will work out surveillance after we are there and have a lay of the land. Kuroka pouted a bit at the fact that the boy didn't even look her way, but quickly pushed the thought out. Thinking over what he had said, she nodded. I'll be able to get a quick scan of where most of the supernaturals are generally located, so we have an idea of who we are looking at. Can we assume the target will be with one of the groups? Even if she was flirty, she knew she was here for a reason and she had to be serious sometimes. Volley nodded as she went over her idea. He stopped and turned to her as they reached the door to his team's lounge. No, well it is possible that he is affiliated with one of the supernatural groups. Office-sama said that he has just awakened, so he may not have come in contact with any other supernatural beings yet. Volley explained. The silver-haired teen didn't give the woman behind him another chance to talk before he pushed open the door and entered. The lounge was a very well-decorated room. Set up like a manor home in a classical time period. Large flowing dark red drapes half covered the wall-length window on the far wall from the entrance, allowing in enough light without it being blinding. The windows themselves were magically set to show a mountainside view of a valley that was parted by a river. Volley never could figure out if the view was of a real place or if the caster had simply made the place up. In the center of the room was a large square low-set table, surrounded by padded wood couches, one for each face of the table. The couches were all identical, 3 seats on burgundy cloth-covered padding and swooping high backs. Decorative vines and leaves were carved into the wood that lined the couches. The walls were lined with bookshelves and work desks, each covered in various different items and topics of study. The stone floor was covered in a large throw rug, black in color. Scattered around the room in different places were the rest of his teammates. Arthur Pendragon, who was another teen around his age, with blonde hair that was tied in a braid that hung in front of his left shoulder. Arthur wore an ability-style dress suit complete with a flaring blue tie. He wore silver wire-rimmed glasses, giving him the air of a well-to-do student from a protégé school, rather than the deadly swordsman Volley knew him to be. Arthur was sitting next to his sister, going over an old journal trying to translate it. Arthur's sister, LaFay Pendragon, was a cute blonde girl who was dressed in a light blue stereotypical witch outfit, including pointed hat, a cape covered in small pink flowers, and broom off to the side next to her. The girl's demeanor was practically night and day from her brother's. Where Arthur was stiff and noble, LaFay was happy-go-lucky. While she would worry about the others when they were on missions or hurt, she never stayed that way and returned to her cheerful personality soon afterward. The last of his team was the monkey yokai, Biku. Biku was a normally loud and boisterous person who could match Volley's own battle lust. Currently, however, he was snoring very loudly as he lay sprawled across one of the couches in the room. The monkey was clothed mostly in a tight armor vest and loose-fitting black pants. His short normally spiky hair was now matted down from sleep as a line of drool ran down his cheek. Volley stared at the sleeping man for a moment before turning to Kuroka. "And you want me to act more like him?" he asked while pointing towards the drooling man. Not exactly like him, just relax more." Kuroka tried to say, the sweat drop running down her head, indicating she was thinking similar thoughts upon seeing the sleeping yokai. "Forget I asked." "Please." "With pleasure." Volley replied. Naruto sat silently, staring up at the full moon in the night sky, wind gently brushing his hair. Kaneko was sleeping soundly, using his chest as her pillow, while his back was pressed into a tree near a cliff face. Naruto was in a muscle shirt and pants, his jacket folded beside him, while Kaneko was in a light shirt and track pants. Both of them were covered in a light sheen of sweat, their clothing damp and clinging to them. All around the pair were a good 30-some copies of the blonde boy, each quietly holding a water balloon in their hand with looks of concentration on their faces. The mountain and forested area around Ria's family vacation home was surprisingly comforting to the normally high-strung blonde. Even if he'd never been here before, Naruto found himself feeling a surprising amount of familiarity with the environment that put him at ease. Even just sitting here with someone leaning on him, an act that would almost always cause his muscles to tense in the past, he found himself relaxing more easily. He still had a lot on his mind, things from his past, his Rasengan training and how he got his necklace. Thoughts of things from his present. Such as what had happened during his fight with Mistima that caused the void flames to start hurting him and the upcoming battle against Riser and his peerage. He even had thoughts for the future, such as what he was going to do with everyone here if he could travel to other worlds once his magic evolved enough, and what he really felt about the people he had surrounded himself with. Before, he could have easily said he'd leave everyone behind and not look back. He'd done it enough in his youth in this world, but now he was not entirely sure if he could truly leave. He had meant it when he told Rias he thought of them all as a part of his life and he wanted them there, but until right now, with this unique calm allowing him to relax his overworked mind, did he realize how truly understand how important to him the group had become. The girl currently snuggling into his chest had been a constant companion to him, always reminding him that he wasn't alone anymore, even when he had said he didn't need such, she didn't leave him. His taking in Hikari had been a whim originally, as he honestly thought she'd have been on her way within a few days, a week at most. To him, helping her had been a simple impersonal good deed, like with his vigilante fights. Get in, do what needs doing, and be on his way. Then they could put the experience behind them and move on with their lives, never seeing him again and never feeling indebted to him. His new memories made him now realize why he fashioned his fighting ethic off ninjas, even if they were very different from the shinobi of his world. Things didn't turn out the way he planned, and she had made her way into his heart. That was something he didn't think possible at the time. Between the two younger girls, Naruto had finally opened his walls a bit, allowing for the others to worm their way into his life. He openly admitted he still wasn't used to this many people and had trouble dealing with them sometimes, but all of them were patient with him. Yuto would stay up with him some nights just being normal guys, watching action movies, playing cards and talking about weapons. They'd even swapped funny stories of stupid things they'd done in the past. The Kendo and Rias had even had an effect on him. He was getting used to people touching him without him reacting instinctively, either by moving away or lashing out. He was very glad that Akeno was the queen of Ria's peerage, as her speed allowed her to get away when she had surprised him, and he spun around with a fist. He'd managed to pull it when he saw who it was, but she had also reacted, quickly stepping away. That had been very embarrassing for him, as he thought he had better control of himself than that. Akeno had forgiven him and apologized quickly for scaring him, but that reaction had confirmed for them he was very troubled. The fact that they had doubled their efforts to get him used to them rather than back away confused and comforted him. Kaneko was right, this group is what I needed. For all their faults, they really are family. Naruto thought, with a small smile crossing his lips. The proof of how much good they had done him could be seen in Asia. He'd made an effort to interact with the girl. He had been the one to reach out rather than pick up the pieces like he had with Hikari or what the orc had done with him. Now the girl was truly smiling when they talked or were hanging out. She always seemed to gravitate towards him more than anyone else, with Hikari as a very close second, but he put that off as hero worship more than a connection, something that would pass with time. Feeling a purr and slight rustling, Naruto looked down at his white-haired training companion. The girl had pushed herself to the point that she'd fallen down asleep without even making it a step towards the house, and as Naruto hadn't even started his private training, he couldn't return. He could have sent her back with a shadow clone, but most of his chakra was going to be needed to heal him as he worked on his flame recovery, and what he had to spare was being divided to relearn the Rasengan. He also noticed goosebumps forming on the girl's arms as the light breeze was enough to pull away the body heat from the pair. While this was fine for Naruto, as he was still very warm, the resting girl was likely to catch a chill if left alone. Naruto slowly adjusted himself so that his arms were free to move and carefully reached around himself to grab his discarded jacket. Pulling the resting girl up a little more towards him, he pulled the coat over her upper body, as well as himself a little, just enough that both were covered and comfortable. Once he was sure the girl wasn't going to wake, he leaned himself back more onto the tree. One of you guys wake me once you are done. Someone has to replace me while I work, but I don't want her waking up. The boy called quietly to his clones. The closest clone nodded before he moved to inform the rest. Confident he wouldn't oversleep, the blonde boy closed his eyes to rest and enjoy the fresh night air with his once again purring companion. He was awakened several hours later to his clone leaning over him with a cup of coffee, a very small campfire burning a few feet away in a cleared out area of the forest. Naruto surprisingly wasn't as tired as he normally was in the morning and was easily able to switch himself with the body pillow his clone had insightfully gotten them when he was resting. Looking over the girl while he took the coffee with a nod, to which his clone dispelled after receiving, Naruto saw that his clones had covered them both with an unzipped sleeping bag at some point in the night. Naruto grinned a bit, taking a sip from the metal camping cup. He really hadn't been expecting to have a fully furnished mansion waiting for them when he'd set out for this trip and as such had packed for a camping trip. He had a tent out here that he could sleep in if needed, as well as all the needed equipment to hunt, fish or anything else he may need during the time he was away from town. He told Yuto that to get the best results from this trip, he should rough it as well, and the other boy had taken his words to heart and carried a blanket and pillow into a separate section of the woods to train, saying he'd be back for food the next day. Naruto had a clone watching him and would let the whiskered dragon kin know if Yuto needed anything or was in need of help. As both Yuto and Kaneko had their gravity seal adjusted to use magic now, they could control them themselves, so his assistance wasn't needed. He refused to just end his training of Yuto there however, so a clone without the gravity seal would always be around to spar with Yuto at noon, this allowing the blonde knight to get used to dealing with faster opponents and inform the boy when he should increase his seal level. Finishing his coffee, Naruto returned to the present. Forming two more clones, one to go replace the one watching over the blonde boy and one to cook breakfast. Naruto heading towards where he knew there was a rocky area of the mountain so that he could start his own training. He knew that if he tried using his flames in the forest, there wouldn't be anything left of the area he trained in. Also, he enjoyed the feel of the forest in this area, so he wasn't going to take the chance of losing it by mistake. Once he entered the rocky area, he spotted the gorge that one of his clones had located. It was only 100 meters or so away from the forest, but it was also a good 50 meters deep as well. That was what made it perfect for him to try and regain control over his void-based abilities. That was something that he knew he needed to do, even if he was very sure it was going to be incredibly painful to do. He took several steps toward the gorge before stopping. Thinking over what he was about to do, he sighed aloud. Looking up into the star-filled sky, he wondered how he was going to go about this to ensure he wasn't caught. He knew if his companions were aware of how much this was hurting him, they'd either worry or try to stop him. This was something he couldn't allow on either account, they had their own problems to worry about and he was their support, not the other way around. They were already doing so much for him, he couldn't ask them to do more. On the other hand, if he didn't relearn control of the flames, they could come out at the worst moments and hurt the others, something he couldn't allow to happen. Thinking over his options for a few minutes, Naruto nodded to himself and crossed his fingers into a plus shape with his index and middle fingers from both hands. In moments, another of the blondes stood in the clearing next to the original. Stay out of view for now. If the flames stop but I'm not up in 10 minutes, come get me. Bada boss, if kitten comes looking before you're done. The clone asked. Make 2 clones, one to dispel to warn me and one to come get me while you distract her. She's the one that would worry about us most. Naruto said after he thought about it for a minute. After the clone nodded and jumped into a tree, the original moved to the edge of the gorge. He only hesitated a moment so that he could find the flames of nothingness inside himself. Tilted forward, he let himself fall into the 50-foot drop before calling his newest power out once more. The clone that was left to guard the area between forest and the gorge, which his creator had dropped into, was treated to the sight of the entire landscape being lit up by a massive ball of black fire expelled into the night sky. A few moments later, the process repeated itself, then again and again. After 2 hours, the clone dragged a exhausted and soaking wet Naruto back into his campsite, Kaneko still sleeping, though less contently, under the tree. "Damn boss, you look horrible." The clone that stayed behind said as he saw the boy carried into the camp. "I feel it too." Naruto barely managed to say, his voice harsh and cracking. The clone quickly grabbed a towel and handed it to his creator. Said creator took the towel, only to start to fall forwards from pain and exhaustion. However, he was caught by a large collection of shadows pulsing up from the ground and holding him in place. "Thank you, Tabor." From the shadows cast by the campfire, Naruto's new familiar slowly raised and moved towards his master. The large being gave a low whine when he saw the state of his alpha, nuzzling the man's hand with his snout. "Yeah, I'll be okay. Just overworked myself." Tabor whined lightly before licking the boy's hand, to which the boy responded by petting him. "We really need to think of a real name for him. Tabor's a great joke and can be what we call him at home as a nickname, but it just doesn't feel right for him." One of the clones said as he started digging out a dry shirt for the original. "I know and I'm working on it. Nicknames are easy, coming up with real names, not so much." Naruto commented as he toweled himself off, pulling the drenched ruined muscle shirt off. "I'm looking through as many legends and myths as I can find, just haven't found anything fitting yet," Naruto explained. As he caught the shirt his clone tossed to him, he saw the slightly confused look on the wolf's face and chuckled. "You didn't really think Tabor was all I was going to call you, did you?" He laughed a bit more when the wolf nodded. "Nah, that's just among family, just like how I nicknamed everyone else. Once you've done something that inspires a name, I'll give you a real one." The wolf nodded and started panting lightly, almost like he was smiling at the boy, happy that the threat of become a car part was more joke than reminder now. Nothing else was said as he followed his master back to where he slipped back into bed next to the white-haired cat Yakai. Before both dropped off to sleep, tomorrow all would start the new training schedule to prepare them for the battle that would decide their red-haired friend's future. Kaneko grunted while sliding backward into a tree, her guard stance not falling even with the impact. It was day 3 of the group's 15-day training period, and since they had arrived all the white-haired girl was doing was sparring with a blonde across from her. She'd raised her gravity seal to level 6, while Naruto had added a resistance seal, making the air feel like mud. Even with the gravity their combined effects, she was barely moving, but still she pushed to train. At the end of yesterday's training, Naruto had lead Asia to their campsite so the nun could heal the pulled and torn muscles they both had. He'd also brought back enough food to last them till tomorrow. Asia also explained that she was trying to expand her magic reserves and try to learn other healing spells. The three had talked at length of the goals they intended, and Naruto had made suggestions that Asia start studying barrier techniques so that she could heal and protect at the same time. The Kaneko, the nun, looked like she was hearing Naruto's words as law, even if, said blonde male was more focused on consuming as much ramen as possible, which was slightly disturbing to watch. Flashback. "Naruto-san, you shouldn't eat so quickly, you could choke," Asia said, mentally agreeing with Kaneko even if she didn't know it. Naruto finished swallowing his last mouthful of ramen from his third bowl, as he'd eaten some sushi and rice to help fill him up. "This is nothing, Goldie, I am trying to keep down my pace as I don't want to disgust you girls." "Disturbing," was all Kaneko could say while she stared at the boy. Naruto just gave a small smirk as he tossed the empty dish into the garbage bag he had gotten from the house. "What are we training in next, Naruto-senpai? Why do neither of you ever just call me Naruto?" The blonde boy countered with his own question. Asia tried to stutter out a reply, something about disrespectful, but Naruto couldn't really make it out. Kaneko just stared at him blankly waiting for her answer. With a soft sigh he decided to just answer the younger girl. "Right now I'm working on trying to get your endurance up so that you can keep up with me longer. Currently you can last about 20 minutes full out before your stamina gives out. With the sparring you're starting to instinctively pick up on my style and how to counter it. If there was a way for you to recuperate more energy it'd be easier." "Ah no, could I help?" Asia asked shyly, getting a small smile from Naruto and a grateful look from Kaneko. "Sorry Goldie, you already told me your gear doesn't heal stamina, nor do you know any spells for that," Naruto said. Asia's mood fell well when she heard that. "Stop holding back," Kaneko said to Naruto. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the request from the girl. "No flames, you're holding back." I'm trying to get my flames back under control. They have been acting up since the church, Naruto said while leaning back a bit to stretch out his back. He released a soft content groan when a loud pop sound. So until I have my control back I can't use my flames in a spar. Luo, I'm sorry Naruto-san. It's my fault that you lost Owie. Asia stopping and was rubbing her forehead where Naruto lightly flicked her. Nothing that happened there was your fault Goldie. You were just a victim of circumstance, do not blame yourself. Naruto said smiling at the blonde girl. Senpai is right. Kaneko said with a nod. Asia looked between the two with tears in her eyes, but the wide smile on her face let them both know that she was far from upset. Hi. She got out with some effort as to not choke on her words. But now let's figure out what we are all doing tomorrow. Flashback end. Well kitten from the way your legs are shaking we're going to have to call it for now. You're getting better though. Naruto said as he moved to walk off, only to have to stop and bend backwards as a foot flashed in front of his face. Not done. Kaneko growled out, wisps of red energy around her. Naruto raised to a standing position, sliding right into a stance without a thought, his eyes flashed into garnet slits of his energy sight. What he saw was fairly shocking. Well she wasn't truly doing senjutsu as she had explained it to him, she was taking in energy and using it, his bleed off to be exact. Well isn't that interesting? Kaneko, hyped up on Naruto's strong chakra, attacked first. The girl threw a supercharged right hook that Naruto backflipped to avoid, planting one of his feet into her stomach to continue her flight. The girl turned her flight into a flip, landing it before she turned herself into a spin kick that actually released a crescent wave of Naruto's red chakra. Said blonde needed to cover both his arms in his chakra cloak as he blocked the attack as to not lose anything important as it was he still ended up with a large gash on his forearms. With another growl the girl was on the blonde again in heartbeat, throwing punches and kicks far stronger than she had ever before. She's showing this much improvement in strength and speed when using her senjutsu wrong. Doing it right will be amazing. That was when Naruto noticed something about his sparring partner, her eyes were unfocused and starting to gain a red hue to her golden eyes. You're running on instinct aren't you? Frowning at the thought that the girl was going out of control over absorbing some of his chakra Naruto called out his flames to replace the chakra he was using to fuel his body. Ducking another punch to the face Naruto shot out a swift palm stick to Kaneko's stomach, with his flames just under his skin. He was no longer feeding the white-haired girl a supply, as well as the flames could consume the extra energy in the air through him. He just barely held back a wince when ebony flames shot out around his palm as it impacted into the Nekashu's abs. He willed the fires away before they could burn his friend, but he was sure this was going to be a long fight for control of his void abilities. Falling into an offensive stance Naruto kept his hand open as to do more pushing strikes rather than damaging attacks he'd do with fists or claws if they came out. His aim right now was to try and get Kaneko to burn off his chakra as she wasn't really controlling herself at the moment there would be little gain from having a real spar. With this thought in mind Naruto released his seal completely and kept his garnet eyes on the girl, who was now back to her feet and racing towards him at far better speeds than he'd seen from the girl before. Shaking away the thoughts of how he could use this for training or in the match, as unless she could keep her head in battle, it would be pointless. Metal clashed against metal as sparks flew from the impact point. Good, I'd say you're almost ready to increase the level again. You must be really pushing yourself prep. The fighters jumped back from each other as the blonde knight swiped his hair back away from his face, the large amount of sweat he'd accumulated from his workout causing it to stay slicked back. I'll believe that when I can hit you damn it. The youth grumbled. It seemed that no matter how much he improved the ninja always stayed one step ahead. When it came to pure skill he knew he was the better swordsman, but Naruto had enough of a speed and reflex advantage that it negated most of his abilities. But hit me and you'll be out a sparring partner. The other blonde said as he moved back into a ready stance. Would do a world of good for my ego though, and it's not like more of his shadow clones can't be made. Oh I'm just feeling the love here prep. The clone of the blonde ninja said sarcastically. HMPH. Yudo didn't really say anything, his response came in the form of him jumping forward in a downward slash. While the attack form had been normal the attack itself was not, as a faint white glow covered Yudo's body. The Naruto clone managed to jump back and away from the attack zone just as Yudo crashed into the earth, leaving a deeper crater than should have been possible for such an attack. Naruto himself narrowed his eyes as he looked at the results of the attack, his eyes shifting from blue to red as he tracked all the energies in the clearing they'd been fighting in. He's unconsciously channeling his magic through his body like I do chakra and my flames. Naruto thought before he got a grin on his face, while not perfected yet Yudo had just started to create his own techniques. If he can get the boy to start using them consciously, then this could move the other boy onto a whole new level for his fights. Those thoughts were tabled for another time, and the now red-eyed blonde had to catch his sparring partner as he fell unconscious from exhaustion. Well prep, at least now you get to see the results you wanted. The boy muttered as he lifted the knocked out knight over his shoulder to carry him back to his campsite. Naruto was going to be interested in this. He was more than happy that Yuto was starting to come up with his own counters and new moves to work with, as Naruto himself wasn't as skilled in swordsmanship. He'd lost more than few against the smaller blonde when they worked strictly on skill, and the ninja had to play by the knight's rules.